My fiancé broke off our wedding literally the day before, as she literally told me all of this the day before after she had flown from North America over to Europe to get married. But now I am completely devastated, as I've not only paid for the entire wedding venue and pretty much everything associated with the wedding in general, but now my fiancé's run off and is refusing to respond to me. And at this point, I simply don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. I'm a 37-year-old male and I was supposed to get married this Friday to my fiancé, who is a 34-year-old female. We were together for 2 years in a long-distance relationship, but we met every 3 months. We are both from different countries and she flew here for the wedding, but everything fell apart within a few days. She arrived on Monday and that same morning, I lost my job and I told her not to tell anyone about it. I later found out that she told her friend about it when he arrived the next day, and I felt betrayed because I asked her to keep that private. Well, after her friend arrived, things started changing. My fiancé started acting distant, saying that she felt uncertain about the wedding and that we should postpone it. And this was shocking. We were literally days away. Everything was paid for, the guests were invited, and my family was excited. I told her postponing wasn't practical and that we could fix whatever issues we had together. I said I loved her deeply and was even willing to go to therapy after the wedding as she wished, but that postponing a day before wasn't going to solve anything. During those 2 days, we had multiple arguments, and at one point, she and her friend left my apartment unlocked while my minor sister was still sleeping inside, which really upset me and my family. When I confronted her, she apologized to me, but didn't directly apologize to my family, and that really hurt, but even then, I still decided to move past it. I took her on a walk, I tried to comfort her, and I told her that we will get through this. We then hugged and had dinner with my family, and I thought we had resolved things. But the next day, she told me again that she couldn't go through with the wedding. I then told her that if she couldn't marry me now, that I didn't see a point in postponing, that maybe it was better to end it altogether. I said that if she didn't want to marry me on Saturday, then there was no reason to stay in the relationship. Then I got angry and I told her that she needs to pay the wedding expenses. I then took my fiancé to my mother, and my mother, who is old, weak, and has kidney issues, found out the wedding was off. She then had a minor heart attack from the stress and ended up in the hospital. My fiancé and her friend were also in the room when it happened. My sister got angry and told them to leave, and they packed their things and left my apartment without saying a word. And ever since then, my fiancé hasn't contacted me at all. I messaged her later to let her know that my mom was in the hospital, and she only replied the next day by saying, "I wish her good health," and nothing else. She hasn't read or replied to any of my messages for 2 days, and her phone seems to be on Do Not Disturb. I tried calling, texting her, and I even reached out to her siblings on social media, but I got no response. I even called the police welfare check line here, and they told me she probably was safe and just needed space. I understand she might be overwhelmed, but I can't believe she just left like that. We were supposed to start our lives together. I feel heartbroken, confused, and angry. I also feel like her friend's presence made things way worse, because before he arrived, she was calm, but afterwards, she became distant and almost fixated on postponing, and I just can't shake the feeling that he influenced her decision in some way. I don't even care about the engagement ring financially. I just want it back because it symbolizes what I was ready to give her. I then asked her to return it and help share the wedding expenses since everything was already paid for. I don't want revenge, I just want closure, or at least to understand why she did this. Well, it's been 2 days since she left and I'm still in shock. I can't eat or sleep. I keep thinking that she'll reach out, but I still get nothing. So I really need to know, why would someone end things so abruptly after 2 years and right before the wedding? Is there any chance she might come back to try and make amends? And how do I even begin to heal from something like this? What should I do? Okay, holy crap, this is so sketchy. First of all, why on earth are you getting married to someone that you're only seeing every 3 months? Like, this doesn't sound like a healthy relationship or a relationship at all. So on that end, I think you're very foolish for going through with this and thinking this is gonna work out. But hey, maybe I'm wrong and you guys really do love each other and know each other in that way. So that doesn't excuse the fact that she walked out literally the day before you're supposed to get married. Like, dude, why would she even bother showing up if she's just gonna do that? Now, there is some additional context from the original poster, because he's from Europe and she's from North America, and the guy friend that came along apparently is gay. So there's not like a nefarious cheater situation going on right now. Which, if I'm being completely honest, that's like the first thing that came to mind for me. Like, I really thought for a second there, yeah, she's absolutely cheating on him. And sure, that might be the case, but the way she's going about breaking this off is so weird. Because you don't just decide something like this overnight. You don't spend all this money to fly over to Europe and be like, oh, by the way, oops, I don't want to get married, my bad. Like, she's been thinking about this clearly for a while, and she's only now deciding to cut things off and just kind of run away into Europe somewhere? Like, dude, what is going on right now? That's so stupid. And I hate to say this, but I'm willing to bet that she's probably not going to pay for anything with this wedding. And I'm not saying that's fair, but I'm kind of just looking at this objectively based on the way she's acting after you're like, wait a second, what are you doing? Why would you not get married to me right now? We planned all this stuff. I paid all this money. Like, from the sounds of it, she is gone and she is not coming back. So truly, I am so sorry to the original poster. This really sucks, and you definitely don't deserve this because this really is super messed up. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Today, I messed up by realizing that I'm not a wimp when it comes to spicy food, but instead, I'm actually just allergic, resulting in me finally having an epiphany after 29 years. Here's what happened. So I'm a 29-year-old guy from a Mexican family where if a food doesn't make you sweat, it's not a real meal. I've always been the odd one out. My tolerance for spice is basically zero, and I've accepted my role as the family lightweight. Now, my thing has always been salsa verde. Every single time I ate it, my lips would get puffy and tingly. It wasn't like scary swollen, but it was noticeable. And I just thought, okay, cool. This is what a mild spice feels like for a wimp like me. And this really was just my normal. I would take a Benadryl if it felt a bit more intense than usual and then just get on with my day. But the big plot twist happened last Sunday at a family barbecue. We're all eating tacos and I slather on the salsa verde. And within a few minutes, I feel the familiar puff up starting. I nudged my sister and said, whoa, this green salsa has a kick to it today. My lip is already getting fat. She looked at my mouth and then back at the salsa and then just started laughing. She said to me, dude, that's not a kick. Your lip is actually swelling. Mom didn't put any chilies in that. It's just the tomatillo and onion stuff. The whole table got quiet and just stared at my face. And that's when my mom's eyes got huge. She said, that's not spice, you're allergic. You've been having a reaction this whole time and just called it spicy? And it was here that it finally all clicked. For 29 years, I thought my puffy lip was a sign of my weak constitution, but it turns out my body was just having a low-key allergic meltdown to a total normal ingredient. I wasn't a wimp. I was just unknowingly dosing myself with an allergen and treating it with Benadryl. So yeah, I'm not bad with spice. I'm just allergic to the family's safe sauce. I've got an appointment to figure out what exactly hates me, but for now, the jokes at my expense are absolutely relentless. Oh man, I'm so glad that you're actually like finding out that this is like an allergic reaction, but also, holy crap, it's an allergic reaction. You spent so many times microdosing, that's so scary. I don't know about you, but I have a few family members who have like food-based allergies, and man, anytime they have a reaction, it's like the room stands still and we just look at them, and we say to ourselves, okay, what's actually going on here? Because in some cases, your throat can close up, and that is terrifying. So yeah, I'm glad you got this figured out, and hopefully you can find some kind of solutions with your doctor, because I can only imagine the way you felt left out your entire life, but at least you know that you're not just some kind of lightweight and you actually have a legitimate excuse. Did I overreact by asking my parents to leave after my mom grabbed my wife's belly and asked her if she was pregnant? Because in reality, my wife has just gained weight and become very insecure about it. And now at this point, I'm very frustrated and I don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. I'm a 29-year-old male and my beautiful wife had gained a significant amount of weight after our wedding. I think she's gorgeous, but she's insecure about how she looks now. Well, my mom and dad had bought a house that was about an hour-and-a-half drive from us. The four of us were supposed to have a lovely dinner at my home, and my parents had arrived early and my wife hadn't changed out of her cooking clothes. She was just wearing this really tight t-shirt. Well, my mom saw my wife, she grabbed my wife's belly and asked my wife if she was pregnant, to which my wife said no and that she's just getting fat. Now, I didn't want a massive argument, so I rushed my parents out, basically telling them that we have to reschedule, congratulations on the new house, and we'll save them some food later on. And then as she started to cry, I just kept assuring my wife. Well, several days later, I talked to my parents by myself. My mom said that she had made a mistake, but apparently I had taken it too far by asking them to leave, but I basically explained that I could only see that evening getting worse. My dad said that by not allowing my mom to apologize that day, that's now the reason why my wife would see them as jerks. But I literally told my parents that mom can literally apologize now, but they're saying that now it will seem like to my wife that they're apologizing because I told them to. So seriously, did I overreact here by kicking him out? Because right now I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong. Okay, holy crap, what in the world is going on here? Who in their right mind would go up to a woman, grab her stomach and be like, oh my god, are you pregnant? Like, dude, what are you doing? You've got to be out of your mind. Like, you've got to be so incredibly socially ignorant that you don't see that's a bad idea. Like, really? There's already a stigma, at least in American society, about being overweight and somehow equating that to you not being attractive, which is just not the case, man. So for your mom to go up and be like, oh my god, who's pregnant? Without any kind of evidence of like, yeah, she's pregnant, pregnant and that's why she has like a bit of a belly, that is crazy, and that is like the biggest social taboo you could possibly do in that moment. And obviously you know that your wife is insecure about this, so if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. I would have told them to leave and said, okay, we got to do this another time, and then comforted my wife because she started crying. There's no excuse for that kind of behavior. And by the way, yeah, they absolutely can still apologize. And it's not because you asked them to. Like, come on, let's grow up. So no, you did not overreact by asking them to leave, because I probably would have done the same thing. Am I the jerk for telling a kid to shut up on the plane after I spend way too long listening to him scream and cry over the dumbest things? Here's what happened. Okay, so today I went on holiday with my wife. We sat at our designated seats, and in front of us there were 3 kids with their mothers sitting parallel to them. Now, 2 of the slightly older kids, maybe 12 years old, were very well behaved, but the youngest, who was like 9 years old, was such a spoiled little monster, shouting and screaming if he would not get what he wanted, not listening to his mother to stay quiet, or in his seat for taking off. He was pressing on the seat in front of him with his legs, and so on and so forth. Now, I was quite irritated and appalled by such bad behavior, and I just looked at my wife with my eyes in disbelief, since the mother tried to keep him under control. The flight took off and he got his iPad and watched cartoons. I had my headphones on and fell asleep, but as the plane landed quite far on the landing strip, we had quite a while to wait. The kid then started screaming and shouting for this and that, throwing a tantrum, and you know what? At this point, I just had enough. I sat up a little bit, I looked at him, and I said, hey kid, you need to shut up. Well, the kid stopped, said nothing, and the mom just said, oh, he's just a kid, like twice. But seriously, if you can't control your kid to the point that I hear him through noise-canceling headphones, then yeah, it's a bit too much. In my opinion, I did everybody a favor. Even his siblings were tired of him, with his brother saying, I mean, he is not wrong, but not exactly right, which I found to be a bit funny. Also, the boy that I told to shut up sat on his seat facing me and stared at me for a while in defiance, I suppose. And I doubt I created trauma or anything like that. So seriously, am I the jerk for telling that kid to be quiet? Because in my eyes, I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, honestly, if I had to deal with a kid like that and they were screaming and shouting, like actually screaming and shouting, and they're not listening, like at that point, if I heard someone say, hey kid, shut up, I would not be surprised. I'd be like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Especially if you've already had like a long flight and you have to wait there even longer just to get to your gate. Like that sounds obnoxious and I would hate that. So no, you're definitely not the jerk, because I think what you did is completely necessary. Am I overreacting by blocking my husband's number after he left me and our 7-month-old baby at home all by ourselves, with him basically saying that he's not into being a dad anymore and he doesn't want anything to do with this? Because right now I am heartbroken and I don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. To start things off, I'm a new mom to a beautiful 7-month-old baby. Unfortunately, I'm navigating deep heartbreak as my husband and the child's father, someone I've been dating since I was 19 years old and who I've been married to for 2 years, chose to leave because he's not feeling it anymore. Don't get me wrong, there were signs. I mean, during the pregnancy, as I got bigger, he seemed to resent my request for help around the house. At one point, when I asked for help taking the garbage out, he said to me, if you want something done, do it yourself. I even fell 2 times taking the garbage out and was shocked at his callousness. This is also a man who was happily in love with me for our relationship and through our wedding, and who I've moved across the country with multiple times, and with whom I share 3 amazing animals and now a baby. Ever since giving birth, he's made allusions to my weight gain and hormonal fluctuation that has made me very emotional. All of this is leading up to his decision 1 month after the baby was born to leave me simply because he's not into it anymore. He moved out and I'm now the primary caretaker, with him visiting sometimes after work or on his days off. Well, for months I've plastered a smile on my face and hoped and prayed that he would realize what he's losing and would want to shape up, but that's just simply not the case. I asked this week to go to couples therapy, which he is refusing to do because it won't fix anything according to him. I accept that he doesn't want me in his life, but my loved ones around me are urging me to take control and stop letting him walk all over me. And as such, I've blocked his number and told him that if he wants to see his baby, we can meet at a fixed location, namely my dad's place, so that I can avoid the heartbreak and anguish of seeing him at our house. He thinks I'm overreacting and doesn't understand why we can't handle this amicably, but what everyone else sees is an overwhelmed, scared, heartbroken mother who's been forced into being a single mom. So am I overreacting by blocking his number and having him see his child only if he's at his dad's house? And am I overreacting for wanting to protect myself by speaking with an attorney instead of an unbiased mediator? I'm deep in postpartum depression and I'm seeking counseling, but I wanted more unbiased opinions because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, before we go any further, the original poster answered the question that I absolutely was going to ask, because they said that they're meeting with an attorney this week and they're going to get things figured out, which is honestly what I was going to suggest. Like, it really sounds like this guy is a piece of garbage, and he literally kicked you to the curb the second he realized, oh wait, I'm going to have to be responsible for a child now? No, I don't think so. I'm suddenly not into this, so I'm going to go. See ya. And it's like, dude, what's going on right now? You're suddenly leaving now that your wife is pregnant? Like, you're such a loser. So to the original poster, I'm so sorry this happened. That must be so heartbreaking, and I can only imagine going through that. So for the sake of you and your child, I hope this all works out in your favor because you guys absolutely deserve it. Am I the jerk for finding out that my boyfriend was lying about me? All because I was secretly listening to him through a device that I had secretly hidden in a common area. Because right now I feel like everything's fallen apart and I just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I've been dating my boyfriend for about 2 years now, and for the sake of the story, we'll call him Joe. A few months ago, I overheard Joe talking to someone on the phone and invited them over on a day that Joe knew I would not be home. I suddenly asked him his plans for that day, and he just kind of brushed it off, saying that he wasn't doing anything special, but something just didn't feel right, and I did not trust the person who was going to be visiting. And to be completely honest, they were a very sketchy individual, and they're known to do some pretty horrendous things. So what I did, and I'm not proud of this, is that I got a listening device, and I put it in a common area outside the day that I went away. When I got back, I listened to what was on the device, and I was not prepared for what I heard. Now, I'm gonna give you the short version because there is a lot. Basically, I found out that the sketchy individual did not come over to the house. However, I heard Joe talking to his daughter about me, telling her that he's asked me to change my appearance, and telling her that Joe has repeatedly told me to shave and how it's not appropriate and how I'm refusing to do so, and that I know that he doesn't like it. They were then laughing about my appearance, which really hurt because I thought finally I had a partner who liked me as I was. On top of that, he was telling her that our relationship was over and that he's told me to move out multiple times, which by the way, this is all news to me. I thought we were doing great, and after a year and a half of Joe asking me to move in, I finally did, which is literally 2 weeks prior to this situation. Now, not only did I hear that conversation, but shortly after that, Joe was talking to his friend about all these intricate plans to move out west together, and how I was not only not coming along, but also how our relationship is over. I was really hoping this was just a fluke, and Joe was just trying to get attention or sympathy from his peers, but to be on the safe side, I kept listening for a week, and every single conversation was the same thing, about how the relationship is over and about how he is moving and leaving me behind, how he's asked me multiple times to move out, and how I've been begging him to take him back and all this other crap. And all the time, Joe has no idea that I'm aware of what's going on right now. So after a week, I confront him. He denies everything, and when I tried to have him listen to the audio, he simply refused and just kept talking over it, saying that he doesn't remember any of that. Joe said that the conversation with the friend was not real, and they always make plans, and that I could even ask his daughter because he would never do something like that. He then turned the situation onto me, saying how I can't be trusted because I was listening to his personal conversations, with him also saying that he would never ever do that to one of his partners. So am I the jerk for listening in secretly to his conversations? Because right now I don't know what to do. Oh man, this sucks pretty much across the board. Your boyfriend is kind of a piece of garbage for being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna leave her. She's gotta go. I've begged her to leave and she's begging me to stick around. Oh, and by the way, there's a detail here that I missed. Her boyfriend is 58 years old and the original poster is 32. Like, holy crap, that is a jump in age. Like, what's going on right now? None of my business, but just something to point out. But regardless, you now know exactly how your boyfriend feels about you, whether you like it or not. And that really sucks because you did this in a way that is really unethical. So his reaction and being like, wow, I can't believe you actually did that. That, in my opinion, is completely justified. Like, I'm sorry, you kind of did this to yourself. So across the board, I think everyone in this story sucks, both the original poster and her boyfriend, because now it really seems like things are just about to catch on fire, and it's only going to get worse with time, and I just don't see this working out. Am I the jerk for telling my fat friend to stop talking about getting in shape and actually just do it for once, as he literally just waffles about and wastes my time anytime I try to help him out? Here's what's going on. Okay, for a bit of background information about myself, I am in good physical shape. I diet, I meal prep, and I'm pretty much your average gym bro. But my friend, on the other hand, is medically obese and a gamer. Every couple of months, he'll go on about how he wants to change his life. He wants to get in shape, he wants to start dieting, as well as be consistent in the gym. Then he'll ask me for the same advice advice I gave him countless times, complain about his lifestyle and why he's fat, and ultimately he'll ask me to start taking him to the gym. He'll then go like one time and then just start flaking out and not go ever again. And then he'll randomly start complaining that I never take him. Then after that, he'll give up and repeat the process again. And I literally cannot tell you how many times I've made workout programs for him, from pep talks all the way to meal prep suggestions and directions. And at this point, I'm sick of it. I told him this time something along the lines of, hey, stop asking me for help. You never take my advice and blame your circumstances on your past. He then went on and told our other friend in front of me, saying, hey, can I go to the gym with you because the original poster doesn't want to take me and help me out? I then went on to tell him that he has no self-control and no accountability, that he literally is blaming all of his mess-ups on other people. And then I told him that if he wants to do it, he needs to do it. Like, stop just talking about it your entire life and instead actually do something productive. So honestly, with all things considered, am I the jerk for the way I handled this? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, honestly, I can completely understand where you're coming from because I'm sure that would be really frustrating. Because you've got it right, man. If you want to exercise and get in shape, you really need to be the one who wants it. And if you don't want it, then holy crap, it's just never going to work out. And it's also super annoying that this guy's trying to be like, you never take me to the gym, almost saying like this is your fault instead of his. And that would probably set my hair on fire. I would be super annoyed by that if I'm being completely honest. So to that extent, I don't blame you for getting upset and I don't think you're the jerk because this guy has got to find motivation in himself instead of trying to place it on other people. An entitled client demands that I work more slowly, stating that they don't want to pay so much money just to try and get their project done. So I comply maliciously, and I work slowly at their demand. But as a result, the client gets upset and demands that I pick up the pace, but still at half the price. Here's what happened. So this happened last year, and I've been waiting months to share the inevitable fallout. So please enjoy this lengthy tale of corporate stupidity. I'll begin by saying I work for a software company. I was working on a project for a client to customize part of the software and stuff like that. The project was very open-ended, mostly because the client kept changing their minds about what they wanted, so the contract was time and materials, meaning that I had an hourly rate. I would log all the time worked on the project in half-hour intervals, and every week, my company would bill the client company for the hours spent on the project. The client said they didn't care how much effort it took, they just wanted a good product, and they wanted it before the end of the year, so they could present it at their big internal meeting. At the beginning, the project went great. Every week I had a meeting with the client and I would get feedback on the progress, as well as new requests that they might have. And then I'd spend however long it took to implement the changes. I'd bill them 15 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, or however many it had been. Slowly over time, the client started requesting more and more. I told them during the meeting that certain features would require more days of work, and that changing things would require even more days that I gotta work on it. And so on and so on. But again, the client insisted they needed all those extra features. They also complained that the project wasn't advancing quickly enough and insisted they needed the project completed before the end of the year. I talked to my manager and explained the situation. To be able to finish quickly enough, I needed to work full-time on this project. My manager moved my other projects to different people, and we told the client that until the end of the year, I would work full-time on the project to ensure that he would hit all the deadlines. The client was overjoyed for maybe about a month. The following month, the client was upset and is demanding to know why we're charging them so much. I pull out my timesheets and I explain that as agreed, I've been working full-time and more on their project. Every week, I've logged between 45 and 50 hours of work, and I have detailed notes specifying exactly how I've spent that time. I'm not particularly concerned about being accused of stealing time because I'm a fast worker and most tasks have been completed more quickly than the original estimates. Besides, I point out that I'm now working twice as many hours as before, so it's costing the client twice as much per week, but I'm also completing a task twice as quickly and will be finished in half the time. The client, unfortunately, doesn't appreciate my use of logical reasoning. They accuse my company of taking advantage, and they say that starting from next week, they no longer want to pay for more than 20 hours of work per week. I tell them, sure, we can do that, but it's October already, and you want the project finished by the end of the year. Given the amount of work still left to do, I need more hours to finish it. The client doesn't let me explain and says that we're not to bill them for anything more than 20 hours per week. They will not pay us for more than 20 hours per week, and they want this in writing, or they will cancel the entire project. And my manager says, of course, the customer is always right. And this is where the malicious compliance comes about. So my manager sends the client an email confirming that, starting from a certain date, my engagement with them will be capped at a maximum of 20 hours per week. He also attaches a spreadsheet of the estimated time to develop all of the new features of the project, how many hours I'd spent so far, and how many hours I projected to spend to complete it. And the client smugly acknowledges all of this. Before the end of the week, my manager gives me back my other project, as well as a new one. You see, at the time we were understaffed because we were growing too quickly and we were getting more requests for new projects that we could handle. So there would have been no point in stealing hours from this client and upsetting them when we could take a couple new clients instead and bill everyone for the actual work and keep everyone happy. So starting from next week, my new schedule is 20 hours with this client, 10 hours with a second client, and 15 hours with a third client. It works great for me, but it doesn't work for that one upset client. At our next weekly meeting, one of the features they requested isn't ready yet. At the following meeting, I tell them we'll need to move the deadline for the next milestone by 2 weeks. Then it's the beginning of December, and they ask me if I would be able to make some last-minute changes and still deliver the project by the end of the year. But I say to them, oh, there's no way the project can be finished by the end of the year. We have yet another meeting with the client and my manager. My manager asks why I'm missing this huge deadline. I say to them, do you remember when I was talking about all the work that I still needed to be done and how long it would take? In October, the project needed another 60 days of work. I worked 10 days in October and 10 days in November because you said 20 hours max per week. It's going to take another 40 more days of work to finish the project. It's now December. Even if I work overtime, there are not 40 days left before the end of the year. My manager is like, yep, that makes perfect sense. The client does the shocked Pikachu face. They act like this is the first they've ever heard about not being able to meet the deadlines, even though I've been telling them this for weeks. Unfortunately, they are the kind of person who never listens to what they don't want to hear. At first, they wanted the work done quickly, so they didn't think that if I worked more hours, I would bill them for more hours. Then they wanted to be billed for fewer hours, so they didn't consider that I would work fewer hours on the project and things would get done much more slowly. Unfortunately for the client, who would like to pretend like we're just springing this on them at the last minute, we had tons of emails to show that we had told them in advance. My manager's email back in October had even included an estimate of when the project would be completed based on number of hours worked per week. So needless to say, we were definitely covered if they tried to claim anything nefarious. Now, as for the fallback, the client kicked and screamed and demanded that I get back to work on their project full time, or even that my company should provide a second person to help me meet the deadline at the end of the year. It's January and the project is still unfinished, so you can probably guess how well that went. The client had to move the big presentation of the new software and was not happy about it, as well as having to explain it to their own CEO. But we told them very nicely in corporate tones to pound sand. I was already scheduled to work on other projects for the next few months, and it had been hard enough to put me full-time on this project the first time. My manager is not going to leave another 2 clients hanging, especially not to please this very upset client who keeps changing their minds and threatening to cancel their contract every other week. As a company, we do our best to keep the client happy, but there is a limit to everything, especially when someone goes out of their way to not listen when we try to explain how cause and effect works and how this absolutely is going to affect their bottom line. I always love stories when the manager backs up their people. I mean, the original poster has it right. If this client doesn't want them working more than 20 hours, well then congratulations, they're only going to work 20 hours and your project is going to suffer because of that. I mean, this guy was pumping out 45 to 50 hours a week for these people, and it was still not good enough, simply because they wanted to be cheap and they didn't want to pay for this guy's time and effort. And that's not fair in my opinion. The way these clients were acting was just so selfish. It's like they didn't even care about all the time and effort that goes into this, and they wanted this done right away while also basically wanting to pay as little as possible. Which, guess what? Sorry, that's not how the world works. Like, you can't just go around expecting stuff to be done in a timely manner and then not pay people for their time and effort. That is oh so incredibly inappropriate. So good for the manager as well as the worker choosing to go the route that basically tells this client that no, you're not going to get get your way just because you throw a hissy fit. Because otherwise, they would have been taken advantage of for their time and effort. And that in and of itself absolutely would not be fair. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next story came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for being mad at my father and my stepbrother after they treat me so badly so consistently? And despite my best efforts, they simply can't leave me alone. They're constantly bothering me, and they always blame all of their problems on me specifically, and I honestly don't know what to do. So I come from a broken home, but gained a mother figure that I was desperate for, along with her 4 children, whom I consider family, which was nice, considering I always wanted a big family, and we were all around the same age. So we were all happy for our parents except for one, her youngest son, who we will call Kevin. That's not his real name. He was against our parents being together, and for a while there, he was determined to break them up. Time goes by, and our parents moved in together. Eventually, he, along with his older brother, moved in with us. At first, everything seemed fine. At this point in my life, I met my then boyfriend, who would soon become my husband later on, and we live in a trailer on the same property, thankfully with our own space, but still too close for comfort. Randomly one day, Kevin texted me basically telling me to keep his name out of my mouth, and how apparently I'm obsessed with him, when in reality, all I ever talked to him about was when he wasn't home, because my husband and I needed to empty out our black water tank, and the septic pipe was right next to his room. So out of respect for him, I had messaged him around the time that we needed to do it. That way, we wouldn't have to warn him that same day that we needed to get this done. So this message came out of nowhere, at which point Kevin was also borrowing a 55-inch TV along with a mini fridge. So I requested these items back, and he went on to accuse me of screaming across the property about him, which is also not true, and how it's none of my business wondering where he is. At this point, with all these wild accusations, I cut off contact with him, simply because of how disrespectfully he was talking to me. When Kevin returned the items, he left them in the middle of my parking spot so I couldn't park. My husband and I didn't have a place to put these items in our home, so we placed them in the garage with our other storage. Not even a month later, my husband and myself went to the garage for some other items stored there, and come to realize that the TV was missing. We looked everywhere in the garage, thinking maybe someone moved it, but it wasn't there. So my husband and I had a gut feeling that Kevin took it given the circumstances. We peered through his window because he wasn't home, and lo and behold, there was my TV sitting in his room in plain view. So I approached my father because I didn't know how to approach the topic, and he just told me that he didn't want to get involved. I then reached out to my stepmom, considering this concerned her son, at which point she wanted to be a part of this situation, considering she read the messages and knew what was said between Kevin and I before this all happened. At which point my father got mad that I involved him. He later went to Kevin and asked him if he had the TV, to which Kevin lied about all of it. That resulted with my father pounding on our door to yell at me for involving him and my stepmom, and that Kevin didn't even have my TV, which I told my father that he was lying and that I saw the TV in his room. My stepmom then went to Kevin's room and saw that he did in fact have the TV, so she took it away from Kevin and returned it to us with an apology. More time goes by, at which point holidays come and go, and anytime we were around, he would glare at me and my husband as if we don't belong there. My father kept telling me that family is family, and that we have to fix things with Kevin. We spent most of the time just avoiding each other, which worked for a while until recently things kind of went downhill. During the time, we were experiencing one of the worst storms in recent history on the West Coast, raining for days on end, wind so hard it shook our trailer. During that storm, I was home alone while my husband worked the graveyard shift, and at about 1:44 in the morning the power goes out, which didn't seem that out of the ordinary considering the storm, but because of the weather it was a very cold night. About 20 to 30 minutes pass by and my phone is almost dead. Out of curiosity, I looked up the electricity blackout site to see how long we'd be out of power, but to my surprise we did have power. So I went to check the plug in case the plug got loose or if it got unplugged somehow, but it wasn't. Still confused, I went and grabbed my keys, which I had a key to the main house, and went to check the power, which was on. Then I went to the breaker in the main house to see if the shed breaker flipped, which it didn't, at which time Kevin just left the home. Frustrated, I went to woke up my other stepbrother by the name of Ryan to ask if he could call and ask if the door was unlocked so he could check the breaker for me. This was around an hour later of us not having any power. Ryan called his brother in front of me on speakerphone and asked him how long he was going to be gone, as well as if his room was unlocked, which Kevin then said that the door was locked. For a bit of context, the access to the main breaker in the house was in Kevin's room. He then asked us why we wanted to go in there, so Ryan told him that I didn't have power and wanted to check the breaker, at which point Kevin said over the phone that he turned off the breaker and left because his room's power kept turning on and off. I heard this and was livid. Ryan told his brother to hurry home and hung up. Ryan agreed with me and said it made no sense to turn off the breaker altogether. Then, not even 5 minutes later, Kevin sends a text message to Ryan to go ahead and enter his room to turn the breaker on. Ryan went off to do that while I stayed in the main house. When Ryan returned, he told me that only one breaker was off and that everything was on in Kevin's room when he walked in. And I believe Ryan because I really don't think he would lie about this. I wanted to confront Kevin, and so I talked with Ryan to see if Kevin would enter the main house, which he did. And when he did, I went off on him. I said to not touch the breaker or we were going to have a problem. And he right off the bat said, "Ew, don't talk to me." And then went on about how he turned off 2 breakers and then accused me of being obsessed with him. I told him the only reason I was talking to him is because he touched the breaker purposefully and that he was lying about the second breaker being off. He then accused me of going into his room, which I definitely didn't. And by the end of the conversations, he was calling me horrible names, only to then storm out of the main house. Sadly, at this point, our parents wake up confused on what's going on, so I tell them the truth, considering it involved access to my power, at which point they agreed Kevin shouldn't be touching the breaker box in his room. That was when Kevin came back in and started to tell them that he only turned off 2 breakers, at which point I told him to stop trying to lie. Then he, in front of our parents, called me some ugly names and told me to shut up. He then storms out and his mom tails him to yell at him, and my father then turned on me and began yelling at me because I was in the wrong. At that point, I stormed out and went back to my trailer because I was sick and tired of being yelled at for something that I didn't even do. My stepmom later apologized for everything that night. Currently, I haven't talked to my father in 2 weeks, and I think I deserve an apology from him simply for him yelling at me about that incident. So it honestly begs the question, am I the jerk for not forgiving and forgetting this situation? I don't think you're the jerk in this situation in the slightest. Your dad is clearly biased towards Kevin, and Kevin is a weirdo. He is robbing you and your husband, and he is literally turning off your power just to mess with you. And he's also making up these excuses, claiming that you are obsessed with him in some way, but in reality, he's the one that's obsessed with you. And that's just creepy in my opinion. At least the stepmom is able to recognize that, yeah, Kevin's a menace, and there's no reason for him to act that way. So overall, you are not the jerk. But in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I definitely would think about moving away from there. That does not sound like a really nice living environment, and if anything, it sounds incredibly intrusive. I mean, just look at the way these people are treating you. They're basically treating you like some kind of outsider, when in reality, you live on this property as well, and you pay the bills to have your electricity up, and no one has the right to turn off your breaker and only your breaker. Like, that's just ridiculous in my opinion. So seriously, I would think about trying to find another place to live, because this living environment is incredibly toxic, and I truly think you deserve so much better. I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend of 8 years simply because he refuses to get a job and sleeps in 16 to 18 hours a day, and I honestly don't know what to do. So let's call my boyfriend John. John is not his real name. John and I are both 28 years old, and we've been dating for about 8 years. Getting into the relationship, I knew John had problems with anxiety and depression. In fact, it's so bad that he's currently on disability for it. When we started dating, I wasn't working full time because I was still finishing up school. We would spend a lot of time together and do a lot together when we started dating, from movies to video games to going to the gym, rock climbing, stuff like that. John hasn't worked since we've started dating, and that was 8 years ago. I deal with my own mental health problems, but I have a full-time job now. But nonetheless, I know everyone is different. John has never made an effort to try and get a job, hasn't even considered it. Not even a part-time one, once a week, odd jobs, anything. It's never even considered for him. John also sleeps probably 16 to 18 hours a day and is up for maybe about 6 of those. He recently discovered that he has sleep apnea as well, which could cause all of this. The hours he's sleeping are the hours that I'm awake, and the hours that I go to sleep are the hours that he's awake. When he's awake, he's either with his friends, going to the gym, or playing video games. He'll be able to get himself up and out to go drink with friends once a week or so, and he doesn't have a problem being social in that way, but he can't find it in himself to be awake throughout the day, to spend time together with me, or to try and get a job. I don't make an insane amount of money, so the cost of living is hard. It's overall manageable, but it is still hard. I want a family so bad. I want kids, but I can never bring kids into this world under the financial situation that we're currently in. I can't bring them in with John just sleeping around all day. I've had a lot of problems with John unrelated to this, but this especially is making it so hard for me to want to continue to be with him. I have so much love for him, and I don't want to see him hurt or struggle. I feel like it would be different if he was actively trying to get out there and work, or just working on his resume in general. It would also be nice if he had some kind of idea of what he wanted to do, whether it be work or even just going back to school or something. But still, despite everything, there's nothing going on for John. I barely talk to John all day. I feel like he's my roommate only. With all of our other problems, I just feel myself not loving him as much. I don't get excited when he comes to hug me. Instead, I get annoyed, and I just don't think that this is the way it should be. Like I said, I have so much love for him. I know he would be hopeless without me, and I don't want that. I feel like he would just get worse. I don't know if he'll be okay. I don't want him to struggle, and if we break up, I can't help him. Is it time to call it quits? Because there doesn't seem to be much of a change going on, and I honestly don't know what to do. It really does sound like your boyfriend is using you, and he is basically leeching off of you so that he doesn't have to get a job. Like, I totally understand he's on disability and he can't work because of his depression. I totally understand that. I know other people who are in that situation. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean that you can just go around and sleep in 16 to 18 hours a day, which, by the way, that's insane. Like, seriously, he probably needs to see a doctor, whether it's sleep apnea or something going on with his body that's causing him to sleep all day. Like, there's no good excuse for that in my opinion. And I totally understand that you have a lot of love for John and you don't want to see him suffer or have to go through this breakup that you're considering, as well as him trying to find another place to live and stuff like that. But let's look at the facts for a second. At the rate you're going at this very moment, after 8 years of dating this guy, you are probably never going to get married or have any kids. Like, just look at his track record. He would rather play video games or go to the gym or spend time with his friends than even give you the time of day or spend any kind of quality time with you. And that's just not fair for you in the slightest. Imagine that as a husband. He sleeps in 16 to 18 hours a day and he doesn't help you with your future kids. And without some kind of income from both of you, raising a child by yourself practically is going to be a nightmare. So if I was in your shoes, I would seriously be reconsidering this relationship. It doesn't matter how long you've been dating him. This guy is not stepping up and proving that he would be a good father. And that, in my opinion, is a massive red flag. And if I was in your shoes, that would be more than enough for me to say, you know what, maybe this relationship really isn't the best thing for me. An entitled child tries to steal money from me at the arcade, and when he's caught red-handed, his entitled Karen of a mother comes over and claims that I stole from him. Things got so bad that the staff had to get involved and separate us from this screaming entitled Karen, and I honestly could not be more shocked by the way she acted. Here's what happened. So this story happened a couple of years ago before COVID-19, but it honestly still makes me laugh incredibly hard. My friend and I were at a bowling alley, not bowling but playing pool at the front. The building also has an arcade, as well as laser tag, which is really fun. We were there midday, maybe 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the evening on a weekend, so the arcade was flooded with kids. Me and my friends were near the bar playing pool, away from the rest of the arcade. Pool was about £1 a game, and the change machine that gave £1 coins didn't work, so we had to use the 50p machine near the arcade. I put a £5 note in the machine and went to put in a second, when literally out of nowhere, an entitled child comes over and tries to take the coins in the tray at the bottom. I notice what he's doing, so I put my hand in the way so that he can't take them. Once I pick them up, he is still trying to get the coins out of my hand. I bring my hand up so he can't reach, and he starts crying. And that is, of course, right when the mother comes over to see the kid pointing at my hand and crying. I know it looked like I probably took something off of him, so I was kind of awkward and didn't know what to say. I would assume that she would be understanding of what was actually going on, and I tried to explain, but she wasn't understanding. She started screaming and ranting that I must have took his money, and even when I tried to interject to try and explain what was going on, she refused to let me get a word in. Eventually, a member of staff comes over and asks me what's going on, with this entitled Karen ranting the entire time. Eventually, another member of staff comes over and has to separate us. I explained that I was getting change and this random kid was trying to take the the coins from the machine, all while I was putting in more money into the machine. They totally understood, and they asked me what I did when the child came over to try and take the coins. I explained that the kid didn't actually get the coins before I got to them, and the person using the other change machine vouches for me entirely. I get the rest of my change and I go back to my friend at the pool tables. It's also worth noting that the entire time I was talking to the member of staff, this stupid child was screaming at full volume, and his entitled Karen of a mother wouldn't stop ranting about what was going on. I'm not sure if the staff kicked them out or if they left or anything like that, but the last I saw them was at the front door with a member of staff standing by the entrance. I honestly feel kinda bad for the kid, who must have only been about 4 or 5 years old. He was wandering around unsupervised in an arcade, probably unable to even play anything, and then got stuck with his ranting mother before being dragged out. I mean, why take your kid to an arcade and not give them money to play anything? But you know what? I've learned my lesson, and I know now to take the change as soon as possible, especially if there's some kind of entitled kid waiting around the corner to try and steal my coins. That's a really sketchy situation, because it really seems like this entitled Karen probably taught their kid that they should steal from people who use the change machine. Like, sure, I totally understand where the original poster is coming from. They're giving this kid the benefit of the doubt, and they're saying, hey, maybe he was just bored and he wanted to play some games but he didn't have any coins. That's reasonable to say the least. But what 4 or 5-year-old is legitimately taught to go up to a stranger and steal money from them? That just does not seem like behavior that a toddler would figure out on their own, but rather that's something that would be learned from their parents. So in my opinion, I really do think that this entitled Karen most likely encouraged their kid to run up to this change machine and grab a handful before anyone would notice. And if that's the truth, again, I'm just making assumptions, then this really is a very messed up story in my opinion. Because I mean, look at the way this lady acted when she found out her kid was stealing from someone. I'm pretty sure any rational adult would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, let me get him out of your way. And they would be apologetic and at least be understanding of the situation. But this entitled Karen took the opposite approach. She tried to claim, oh, you took my son's money, you need to pay us back. And that alone is a massive red flag in my opinion, that basically screams that yes, she was trying to scam this person and she was trying to get money out of their pocket. So if anything, the jerks in this situation are the parents. They are clearly cheap and they're just looking for some kind of excuse to try and skate around the rules and steal from people who legitimately did bring money with them. So I wouldn't feel bad about this situation in the slightest. You didn't do anything wrong, and if anything, regardless of if this lady set up her son to do this or not, that entitled Karen is indeed a bad parent because she tried to claim money that wasn't hers, and that is not fair for the original poster in the slightest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I am being blackmailed by a friend who has been secretly recording me for a long time without my consent or knowledge, and now I simply don't know what to do. I'm a 28-year-old female, and I recently had a falling out with my friend who's a 31-year-old male. We have been casual friends for several years and run in the same circles, so we have a lot of mutuals together. We started hanging out one-on-one last year when I bought a townhome in the neighborhood next to his. I cut ties with him for many reasons, but the final straw was when I discovered he was secretly recording me whenever we hung out. I was extremely disturbed by it. I sent him a long text message letting him know I no longer wanted to be his friend and listed several reasons why, but I emphasized the non-consensual recording as my top one. In response, my friend begged to have one last conversation to bring some closure to our friendship. I felt scummy for trying to end the friendship over text messaging, so I agreed to meet at a coffee shop. I also decided to secretly record our meeting. I recognized that it was kind of hypocritical of me, but I knew my friend had manipulative tendencies, and I was a little bit afraid for me. During our talk, my friend claimed that he was seeing a therapist who encouraged him to record his conversations so they could review them and work on his interpersonal skills. And when he said that, I said to him he should do what he needs to do, but I did not consent to being recorded, and I was not okay with being part of this. He responds by pulling out a huge stack of papers. He had printed out all of the text conversations that we've had. He started reading out random passages and asking me to clarify my responses. Some of the conversations were months old, and he asked me questions with zero context, such as, what did you really mean when you said, LOL, your dog cut off his you-know-whats? At this point, I just became really flustered. I had no idea what was going on, and he kept interrupting me. Eventually, I managed to convey that we are going nowhere with with this, and I did not want to be friends anymore. If we ran into each other at hangouts with mutual friends, I was fine with that, but he will not be welcome in my home in the future. I have since re-listened to the recordings that I took, and I hate how I sound when I said this. My voice is completely hysterical. He said he understood we needed a break from each other, and I can reach out to be friends again when I was ready. He said he was sorry I felt the way I did. He has control over the rest of my life, but he has no control over my feelings. When I got up to leave, he pulls out his tape recorder, the one I found running while he was visiting my home. He said he didn't record our conversation today. He brought it with him, but it's off. He then made a comment that sounded strongly like a threat. He said to me, "Watch, we could go viral together on TikTok." As I was driving home, I started getting calls and text messages from my friends, asking me what on earth was going on. Apparently, he immediately called all of our friends and put me on blast, saying I had been the one secretly recording him and making threats against his life, and he cut ties with me because he no longer felt safe hanging out with me. 2 days later, my brother calls me concerned. My friend had dialed him up and left a message saying that I was threatening people. My friend has never met my brother, and I don't know how he got his number. This makes me really nervous because I work in a public-facing role where my workplace contact information and my business relationships are readily documented. I'm just really nervous about my friend's threats, about sending recordings of me to other people, or about him trying to post them online. I'm not ashamed of who I am, but I don't remember what I said in private. We had a completely platonic relationship, and the only thing I remember doing is smoking the herb together. It all just feels incredibly violating. I checked, and I live in a one-party consent state for recordings. I've never experienced something like this, so I'm honestly at a loss and I don't know what to do. Honestly, from what you've described, this guy sounds like a stalker, and he sounds incredibly insane. I mean, think about it. Regardless of if this is a one-party state or not, he recorded you without your consent, and he is now lying about you behind your back and making these false claims about you. That is crazy behavior, and it's not something that I would take lightly. So seriously, for your own safety, it's probably time to contact the police, as well as maybe getting a lawyer involved. I mean, don't forget, you have all of this on recording when you met with him at that coffee shop. Share that with the police and tell him exactly what's going on. And hey, if he really wants to go that route, then share it with the friends who seriously think you're the crazy one. Because this guy has basically threatened your livelihood, and he has threatened your future, claiming that he has control over all of it. I mean, seriously, who would print off all your text messages and expect you to explain away all of the context as well as everything going on? So hopefully this works out for you, because this guy sounds incredibly creepy, and I don't blame you for cutting him off and choosing to not be friends with him. I found an anonymous chat application on my husband's phone where he was soliciting compliments from other women, and now I feel completely betrayed, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'm a 29-year-old female, and I recently married my Japanese husband who's 27. We both live in Japan. We've been together for 4 years, married for 2 months. Yesterday, we needed to scan some documents at the local convenience store because my husband's phone data was running out, so he took my phone to use and gave me his. I have never once not trusted my husband. We are very close mentally, though physically we've recently been lacking due to both of us gaining some weight and losing some self-confidence. We've discussed dieting and working out together and started this year. Anyway, when my husband gave me his phone to use in case we needed to get in contact while he ran out to scan the documents, his phone was unlocked in front of me, and I saw an app by the name of Lemon. I quickly did a Google search, and it told me that the Lemon app was some kind of anonymous chat app, but it felt a bit like a hookup app from the reviews. Despite having never doubted my husband for the past 4 years, I opened the app on his phone, and I felt really guilty the whole time. But when I did, I was met with at least 100 messages to women that he has sent over the past 2 years. All of the messages were started by him complimenting their icon pictures, saying they were beautiful or something along that nature. But the conversations were very short, usually just with a girl saying thank you and then not replying again. A couple messages stood out though. In one of the messages, a woman had asked him about meeting up, but he didn't reply to it. And in another message, he was telling a woman how he wished she didn't have plans for her vacation. The implication felt like he was wishing to meet her. I also saw one chat from 3 weeks ago where he had sent a picture of his face with a picture that he and I had taken together, and I was just cut out of it, and the woman responded with another type of picture that would be definitely inappropriate, if you know what I mean. My husband had kept messaging her without even acknowledging that picture, and the whole thing just felt incredibly strange. At this point, point, I felt like I was in a nightmare because I had no idea what to think. His profile had no personal information except for his age, and his profile picture was blank. So I had no idea what he was gaining from the app, and I couldn't process what I was seeing. When my husband came home, I set the phone down in front of him with the not so flattering picture opened up from that woman, and he started trying to explain with a bunch of excuses. English is not his first language, but he speaks fairly well, and as he's doing this, I was just crying at him while asking what those messages were. Over the course of a 3-hour yelling and crying session, my husband explained that he didn't see himself as attractive, and he was trying to look for validation from these women. I am perhaps a slightly above average looking white woman living in Japan, which naturally makes me get some attention, and he said he often feels inferior when we go out together because men he talks to always compliment me. This apparently has made my husband feel less and less deserving. He said he wanted to figure out why I'd chosen him when he felt like he wasn't very attractive, but his profile didn't even have his picture, so I don't understand how this application could validate anything for him. I myself have told my husband on numerous occasions how much I am indeed attracted to him. I often complimented his features and call him handsome, and I have always felt like I'm bragging by being able to tell people about him. Up until seeing those messages, I loved him with all of my heart and thought he was the most attractive person in the world. I asked him why saying those things wasn't enough and why he hadn't communicated more with me instead of using such an app, and he just couldn't answer me. 2 years ago, when he started using this application, we were moving in together. He always calls us a family, says he loves me, and all this other stuff. So I simply cannot understand what he gained from this app. He assured me he has never once cheated since we've been together. And while it's true that the messages on this app seem to support that, I feel like all the trust I've had in him is broken. I just brought him to the US in December to meet my family, and we had big plans together. I saw a future with kids with him, and my heart is telling me to stay with him, but my head is so confused and I feel so hurt. He called out sick from work today, something that is not common in Japan, because he told me that I'm the most important thing for him, and he wants to be with me and fix this if there's any chance of doing so. He has been nothing but apologetic and has been acting so ashamed since I found the messages yesterday, but I don't know what I should do next. Also, just as an aside, I downloaded the app and set up a profile with a picture of me wearing a mask just to see what the vibe was. I've gotten more than 20 explicit messages or messages from other people asking for something a little bit more than just my name and how I'm doing, if you know what I mean. And this is all within the space of 12 hours, as well as this being from Japanese men. I showed these messages to my husband and asked him straight up if it would feel like I was cheating were I to respond to any of these explicit messages. Of course he said yes, and said he hadn't realized what it was like for women on the application itself. His own messages to women were not like this at all. They were just complimentary, but this app definitely gives off the vibe that people are either trying to hook up or they're just trying to flirt with somebody. He said he really doesn't like that I'm getting such messages, and he doesn't like me having it. He also stated that he himself has deleted the app from his phone. I feel like I'm living a horrible dream at this moment, and I'm honestly at a loss, and I simply don't know what to do. Honestly, from the looks of it, it really seems like your husband has not been faithful with you. I really believe that he's been lying about his intentions with that application, and I don't think he's been using it to try and get some kind of validation out of it. But instead, he was clearly fishing for something else. So I honestly don't blame you for feeling like your trust has been completely betrayed, because that's exactly what has happened. He went behind your back and he did cheat on you in a way. He was seeking out attention from other women, all while basically having a secret account where the person on the other side of the phone would not know who it is that's messaging them. And that's not fair for you in the slightest. So just based on what you described, I really don't think he's being honest with you. But it does seem like to an extent that he is trying to make things right. And I think you bring up a good point. The fact that he called out of work in Japan, which by the way is one of the hardest working countries in the world, where even calling out to take vacation is seen as some kind of taboo thing, is hopefully some kind of evidence that you can lean on that would prove that yes, he is trying to make this right, but it does not excuse the hurt that you feel and the betrayal that you are currently going through. So hopefully this works out, whether with a marriage counselor or something similar, because you've clearly put a lot of time into this relationship, and it would seriously be such a shame for all of that to come crumbling down. My manager tries to prevent me from proving that I've been working overtime for years, and as a result, he got removed from our team. Here's what happened. So I've done cleared contract work for for more than 20 years. One downside of cleared work is that there is no sneaking in late or getting out early, as everything is logged. A few years ago, I discovered that one upside is also that everything is logged in the books. So I was hired onto a 5-year contract, and for the first 4, everything was fine. I rode the train to work, I did my required 40 hours, I went home, and I had no problems. Into year 5, the same thing happens that always happens in contacts. People start to leave. This is not unusual, as the end of a contract holds some uncertainty, so people will find another new contract to move on to. That way, they don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, the immediate effect is that the workload shifts to the people that stay behind, and things start to slip through the cracks. And you might be asking, why don't they hire more people? But unfortunately, nobody wants to come onto a contract that's in its last year. Well, on this contract, I stayed because I liked the customer and intended to ride out the final year shenanigans. Things started to fall behind. We were down from 15 engineers to 5, and the customer complained that the company was not meeting their contract obligation. What did the company do to fix this? Offer hiring bonuses, pay overtime, or even make lucrative offers for people to stay? Nope. They instead called in their boomer project manager to try and handle everything. And their attitude is that everybody is inherently lazy. From day one, the boomer manager tells everyone that our lack of progress by 5 people on more than 100 active projects is simply a time management issue. And he threatens to pull the door logs to see who is actively at work for 8 hours a day. I figured he was bluffing, and I simply didn't worry, because having been on the train schedule for 4 years, I knew that every day I was in the building from 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock, except for occasionally walking down the street to grab some lunch. The key point here is that being a contractor, I couldn't work overtime without authorization. So for 4 years, I had just put 40 hours a week on my timesheet. At this point, you might see where this is going. The fateful day comes when the manager actually pulls the door logs, and 2 of our engineers get a talking to about their time in the building and how claiming 40 hours without being there for 40 is fraud. I was upset by this because everybody that was left was working very hard, and the 2 guys that the manager had confronted had been working on projects at our offshore location for years. So unless he pulled those logs as well, which he didn't, they would be sure the hours that they were claiming. So what did I do? I stopped by the manager's office and I asked what my door totals were. He told me I was fine and not to worry about it. I told him I just wanted to be sure that my time in matched my timesheet, as I did not want to get caught in any kind of timesheet fraud. Again, he said not to worry about it. So I headed down to see my buddy Tony in security, and he pulled the logs for me. The next week, I walked into the manager's office, I closed the door, and I told him that I had a problem. I had pulled my door logs, and over the past 4 years, I had averaged almost 44 hours a week in the office, but only ever charged 40 hours a week. I had almost 800 hours of unreported labor, and I didn't know what to do about that. He told me not to worry about it, and it wasn't a big deal. The next step in this progress, I contacted our company representative, and I explained the situation to her. She did not think it was a big deal either. In the end, I signed an NDA, but my manager got removed from his role. I bought our whole team beers and lunch, and a memo went out to the team telling us specifically to charge what we worked even if it had some overtime. So in the end, it all kind of worked out. So it really does seem like the manager was trying to pull a fast one on this employee. They basically said, "Oh, don't worry about it, you're fine," without specifically acknowledging that this employee had been working overtime for years and nobody was doing anything about it. This manager was probably just going to try and change the record and make sure that it said 40 hours specifically. But in the end, this manager got pushed off of this project, which is honestly probably for the best of everybody involved. He did not sound like a good manager, and honestly, the rest of the employees that are trying to finish this contract will hopefully be better off without him breathing down their neck. My entitled family shows up for Christmas at my house, despite the fact that I purposefully did not invite them. And even though I told them that they need to leave right now, they refused to go home. So instead, my family stepped in and put them all in their place, in a beautiful display of support that I honestly never saw coming. Here's what happened. So this next story is an update to a previous story we covered on the channel, where the original poster had to deal with their family members basically breaking into their house and changing the locks in some kind of weird attempt to try and force the original poster to allow his brother to move into their house. It was all very unsuccessful, the police were called, and eventually this guy told them to get lost. And this is an update that the original poster provided to give us more information as to what happened next. This is what he had to say. So first off, for those who commented en masse to get cameras, course, I plan on doing that when I can afford it. I'm still in financial recovery from buying a house last year, and as far as I know, good cameras need a decent computer to record things on. And I don't have anything more than a 3-year-old laptop that runs Windows 10, and I am aware of doorbell cameras, and that will probably be the first thing that I buy. And for everyone else saying that I should have gotten my brother and sister-in-law arrested, well, the only reason I didn't do that was because they are parents. Their kids need them. And if Dan, my brother, was arrested, he'd likely lose his job. And without that, his family has no money. And my sister-in-law has a baby that's only a few months old, so neither of them need to end up in jail. But you don't need jail to get revenge. The police can help, yes, but I got payback without filing a police report. But would I be this merciful again? More than likely not, and they know it. So I decided to wait on making an account and posting until the new year, just in case more stuff happened, and it did. As previous readers know, my sister-in-law was making passive-aggressive posts on social media that were obviously directed at me, especially after my sister-in-law had her 4th baby in November. She was posting the same repetitive nonsense over and over again. She just found semi-clever ways to reword it, but she pretty much kept regurgitating that she was tired of living with my parents, and there isn't enough space. She needs her own house and all this other stuff. I know I sound dismissive, but if you live through what I have with these people, and you would also be ready to sarcastically play tiny violins in front of them too. They're just that bad, and it all is so self-imposed. And just like I was assuming of waiting until January to say anything, more stuff did indeed happen. I stated before in a previous post that I had invited half of my family over to my house for a Christmas Eve party, and everyone I invited all came along, even though it was a fairly long drive of around 3 to 4 hours for some of them. But they wanted to come and show their support for me. I was praised by a lot of them for how hard I'd worked to get a house on my own, and that they were sorry for everything that I'd went through. I was asked why I didn't just take my camper and drive the 3 hours back to them instead of living pretty much homeless for so long, and I had to sheepishly admit that I was still very attached to living around here, and I had my best employment opportunities in this area. My hometown doesn't have a lot of great opportunities in my field, if any at all. All I wanted was to make my own way as much as I could, an answer they overall accepted. We moved on to have a rather nice party, and it was the best I'd ever had in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of great Christmas albums, and I have to say, the one my uncle brought of Ray Charles was my favorite. He sings Christmas songs like no one else I've ever heard. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like for once I could just forget my past issues and enjoy the moment, but I wouldn't be writing this story if it had stayed that way, because something definitely went wrong very quickly. About 2 hours into the party, you know who showed up. My parents, my brother, and sister-in-law all popped in trying to look like they were smiling. They didn't even knock. They just walked right in my front door like they were meant to be there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay in the house and said that they even brought some gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I got another chance to speak, and he said they don't deserve to be in my home or my life after all the stuff they tried to pull months earlier. And he was backed up by several other relatives. Mind you, this guy is my mother's brother, and he used to love her to pieces until he found out about all the garbage that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, who are my mom's parents, as old as they are, rushed forward and got between us and said to my parents that if they want to make amends with me, it's far too soon. And they've never been more disappointed in them than they were this past year. They'd hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time, but no one was fooled anymore. And they needed to make a serious effort to try and actually treat me like a son if they ever wanted to be in my life ever again. Then they turned to Dan and my sister-in-law and said they've seen the repetitive nonsense that my sister-in-law keeps posting about online. They are simply tired of it, and they just want her to let it go already. My house will not become their new home. My sister-in-law then went back to her old standard of crying and had a pity party about how she should be the one living here and not me. She plopped down in a chair to have a tantrum and say it wasn't fair I got this house to myself when I have no family of my own and she has 4 kids that need more space, and she just wanted a better place to live in and feel like a real mom. It was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucks as a mother because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she sits around all day drinking, playing on her phone, and going out and spending all of my brother's money. And she has the nerve to complain about it. My sister-in-law then demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom, and I said the evidence speaks for itself, and if she wanted to be able to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, then she needs to put her college degree to some use and get a job job and learn to save some money for once. My mother already does most of the childcare for my brother's kids anyways, so she'd have plenty of time after her baby gets a little bit older. My brother's eldest, who's 7 years old, ran up to start kicking and screaming at me for yelling at his mom, and he kept at me, claiming that his mom said I was a bad guy who made her cry and didn't let them live here. That's when my brother grabbed his son to pull him away, but all the other relatives jumped back in, and this sort of turned into a family intervention against my sister-in-law and my brother. She was crying, her new baby was crying, her kids were crying, even Dan was nearly in tears from the verbal lashing that he was currently being hit with. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman I keep my shoes in by the front door and looking like a complete wreck. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. He couldn't even say 2 words to me, not with a whole house filled with angry people ready to judge him if he even tried to let out his inner golden child ever again. If they weren't there to get in his way, I would bet that this would end up like a repeat of the last time, where they would try to order me around and try to take my house like they did months earlier. By this point though, he'd been so thoroughly humiliated that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were all off. Soon after my parents, brother, and sister-in-law all left in defeat, the party resumed, and we all avoided speaking about what just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night in my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper so there would be enough space overall. I have to admit, it also makes a good guest house. In fact, my relatives all wanted a tour of it earlier as well, and they said they couldn't believe I'd been living in it for about 2 years. I got a lot of questions about it, like what summer and winter was like and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else Christmas morning and had a fresh pot of coffee, as well as some ibuprofen for those spiked eggnog hangovers that a few of them definitely would have. I was complimented on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas, my sister-in-law did finally stop making posts that were obnoxious digs at me and deleted all of the old ones as well. But shortly after the new year, she more recently made a post complaining about how she tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I did so it could be set up in the backyard so Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. Well, a taste of one's own medicine is never fun because my parents turned down that idea. No one is going to push them out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was up for a couple of days before the sister-in-law removed that as well, and she has hardly posted anything since. She loves to complain, but if a tree falls and no one is around to hear it, can it still complain? Well, my sister-in-law, I guess, has realized there's no point in doing it when no one hears her anymore, and Dan can't afford to move his parents out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they end up expecting another child in the next few years, I won't be surprised. Things mellowed down for me since then, and I've even invited friends over for a poker night. I suck at poker because I can never remember a single thing about it, but so what? We get to have some drinks and eat some junk food, all while being complete idiots. We all loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had at it the best way 4 grown men can when they just want to have a good time. I think maybe around summer, I'll look into possibly dating someone. I'm not exactly getting younger here, but fingers crossed that it goes well. My camper for the most part just sits idly in my yard now, and I have to admit, there were some days that I went out there just to spend some time in it. I did live in it for 2 years after all. It's like my second home, and maybe one day I'll actually get to use it for camping, just like it was meant to be. I've never actually been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time, so it'd be a completely new experience for me. And this pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, my brother, and sister-in-law have all been staying very clear of me. In fact, they seem to have gone back to acting like I don't even exist, which is exactly what they did before I bought a house. Not like that bothers me at all. It's better that way. But they will inevitably come back in some kind of way. I know they will. But it truly makes me wonder what kind of stupid thing they'll come up with next just to try and insert themselves back into my life. That really is a nice conclusion to this story, and I'm honestly really happy for the original poster here. For some context, this guy went through a lot of garbage just to get what he has in life. He had to live in a camper because his family refused to help him out, and his brother and his sister-in-law were incredibly cruel to him when he basically had nothing. But he saved up, he worked hard, and he was able to buy his own house, and his family basically tried to kick him out of it. It was absolutely awful and honestly so uncalled for. So the fact that he's able to have not only family in his life who understand where he's coming from, but also defend his good name, but also finally have some peace and quiet, because his extended family is incredibly toxic. And for the sake of the original poster, I seriously hope he never has to deal with those people ever again. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link link down below in the description. An entitled customer that I was serving at my restaurant job got right up in my face and started screaming at me about the menu that we had. Things got so bad that a new server had to take over and try and deal with these entitled, ridiculous customers. Here's what happened. So in all my 3 years of serving, this has got to be one of the worst tables I have ever served. This group sits at my section and are immediately rude to begin with. So I already knew right away that they were going to be difficult, just not as bad as I even imagined. They spent at least 15 to 20 minutes trying to order and wouldn't even let me go up and check on my other tables, even though they were clearly not ready to order. And worst of all, I was slammed busy, so I got behind in my rotation because of these people. Eventually they do order, so I finally run off to put in their order and check on my other tables. At this point, all my other tables are ready to close out, so I drop off the checks and I go over to check in on this difficult group. When I asked if they were doing okay, the one lady comes over to me with the menu and points to the champagne bottle and asks me, "What is this?" Now, I'm very confused by her question because it clearly states on the menu what kind of champagne it is, and it has all the information that she would need. I say to her, "It's our only champagne that we offer. It only comes by the bottle, but I am able to bring out as many glasses as you need." She then rolls her eyes and yells at me, "That's not what I'm asking." Now at this point, I'm taken aback because I have no clue what on earth she is asking about, and she's now screaming in my face. She then points to the price on the menu and asks me the same question all over again. "What is this?" And I'm left scratching my head as if I'm supposed to understand what she's talking about this time around. So once again, even though I'm confused, I say, "We only offer champagne by the bottle, and that is the reason for the price." She then screams again, "That's not what I'm asking." And at this point, I'm just incredibly uncomfortable. And when I'm uncomfortable, I tend to laugh. So I say in an uncomfortable laugh, "I'm really sorry, I am not understanding your question." She screams at me again and says to me, "How do you not understand me? What is the matter with you?" At this point, she turns to her friend and they start discussing if they want to order the champagne bottle. Meanwhile, my other 4 tables are all waiting for me to close them out. I knew this group would take a while to decide, so I said to them, "I will be back in a couple of minutes and give you guys some time to decide if you want to order some drinks." I step away and I go deal with my other tables. I then see off to the corner of my eye this lady screaming at my manager for about 10 minutes. Afterwards, my manager comes over to me and tells me that they requested a new server and that it would be better to move them to a different section. And you know what? I am totally fine with this decision, since I absolutely did not want to deal with being screamed at anymore. I then later found out that this group thought I was judging them because I didn't think that they could afford the bottle of champagne, which was honestly never even a thought in my mind, as I was just trying to figure out what she was asking me in the first place. The server that took over for this group even told me later on that their card declined at the end of the evening, and they were also giving him a hard time. Never in all my 3 years of serving have I had a table request someone different. I was just trying to be as polite as possible, but instead I got screamed at by an entitled customer. What an awful group of people. I mean, they basically went into that restaurant and decided, you know what, let's cause some problems. And who just points at a menu and starts screaming, "What is this? What is this?" without even further specifying what it is you're even talking about in the first place. Like, that's honestly obnoxious, and it's just equally as disrespectful for this stupid customer to assume that anyone would know what they're talking about. It's also kind of disappointing that the manager didn't kick them out on the spot. Like, I can understand you're trying to be nice to the customer and you're trying to be accommodating, but it's pretty obvious that they're being irate for no reason, and they're clearly treating everybody like garbage. Not to mention their card got declined at the end of the night. Like, come on, really? You went to a restaurant and now you're trying to play this game? So hopefully these people never come back to this restaurant, because these people have an awful attitude, and there is seriously no good excuse to even begin to justify the way they were acting. My entitled company that I work for is incredibly hostile and aggressive towards their employees, firing people for no reason, as well as refusing to pay their employees for travel, as well as other necessities associated with it. So as a result, myself as well as the rest of the people that work there decided to get malicious, and we intentionally wasted so much money that this company eventually went out of business. Here's what happened. So I used to work for a company about 15 years ago that involved constant travel every month, both domestic and international. We were based in New York, but a lot of people lived all around the US, which worked out since we rarely had to travel to New York if you played your cards right. There were 2 main ways of making this work. You could volunteer for an assignment before your normal rotation started, and they would fly fly you from your home to the work location, or if there was work at or near your home location at the start of your rotation, you could just start at home. If you did the second option, they would pay you at a reduced rate for the time it would have taken to fly you from New York to your home city, where you're now starting your rotation. The travel pay was minimal. It was paid 1 hour for every 3 hours of travel, but it was a win-win. The company saved money on airfare, and you got to start close to home. I was living in Hawaii at the time. There was a lot of work in Hawaii, so I was fully taking advantage of the option to start in Honolulu. Since it was roughly a 10-hour flight from the East Coast to Hawaii, I got paid about 3 hours, and the company didn't have to buy someone airfare to get there. It was a win-win all around. Now, this company could be very petty, as well as very aggressive towards its employees at times. It was a really strange company culture. They would fire or suspend people on a whim, along with other questionable practices. For example, I witnessed 2 employees get fired simply for being in minor fender benders with minimal damage and no injuries. The kicker was they even fired their immediate supervisors over it. It was totally random when they would go off the rails with someone, so everyone just walked on eggshells. It was a terrible place to work, and I was trying my best to find another job, but the job market wasn't that great at the time. I was able to avoid the petty drama for the first year and a half that I worked there, but it finally caught up to me. One day, I noticed that they were not crediting me with the proper travel pay for starting in my home city. Now, sometimes that happens, and you just need to call it in for them to fix it. Up until now, it hasn't been an issue, so I call in to inquire about it, and I'm told they don't pay travel pay. I remind them of the policy and that I've been using it lately without any issue. They then transfer me to a manager who tells me that it has never been a policy. I tell this manager that as recently as 2 months ago, I spoke to someone in their department to arrange it and it wasn't a problem. The manager tells me that they are going to research it and find out who it was and counsel them. And at that point, I remembered the person I spoke with 2 months ago was this manager. So I informed them that they were the ones that fixed it last time. Their response was, "Oh, well, we don't do that anymore." I said, "Okay," and ended the call. And apparently, after that phone call, I had really ticked them off somehow. I have my suspicions of what happened, but whatever. So now it was time to get some malicious compliance involved. So for the next month, and just about every month after that, I volunteered to stay early for an assignment in Germany. Now, instead of paying me 3 hours of pay for the flight I don't have to take, they are now paying the pay and airfare to fly someone else to Hawaii, while also paying for my business class airfare from Honolulu up to Germany, along with the pay for the travel. They're paying several thousands of dollars in airfare simply to try and save paying me a couple $100. I kept this up until I was finally able to quit about 6 months ago, and I got a lot of airline miles out of it as well. They also had a policy where if you were working in a place where they knew you lived or had friends or relatives that you could stay with, they would not pay you the per diem if you canceled the hotel reservation they had for you. So everyone would just check into the hotel and then go stay at home or with their friends or relatives. Now, instead of saving money on the hotel, the company was paying for the hotel and the per diem. This kind of thinking was common at this company. If they thought you were getting something too good, they would spend all kinds of money to make sure you didn't get anything, even if it didn't cost them anything, or if they were saving money in the process. A few years after I left, the company ended up going out of business, and this is clearly no doubt thanks to their short-sightedness as well as their mismanagement. What an absolutely awful company. I can't imagine working for somebody who's seriously going to be that hostile towards their employees. Like, what on earth is their problem? You would think that they would be eager to try and save as much money as they can, especially if they're going to be flying somebody from Honolulu over to Germany. That is not only a very expensive flight, but also a really long one. Like, why would they not just pony up the money and prevent having to pay for all this extra stuff? And you can bet when you have a company like this that treats their employees like a bunch of hostile individuals and acts like they're expendable and they can be fired for whatever reason, then you can bet people in that company are going to retaliate in a very malicious way and try and waste as much of their money as possible just to try and get back at them. If I was in this company, I probably would have done the same thing as the original poster. So honestly, there's no good excuse for the way this company was acting. They acted like complete morons, and they were being unnecessarily hostile towards their employees. So the fact that they went out of business honestly is not that surprising. My fiance's crazy entitled parents kick us out of their house on Christmas morning after we drove 6 hours just to visit them. And as a result, we are both completely devastated and absolutely appalled by their disgusting behavior. Here's what happened. So my fiance by the name of Dan, that's not his real name, as well as myself have been together together for 10 years and only just recently got engaged. He's 35 and I'm 32 years old. Dan moved 7 hours away from home in his early 20s just to escape his toxic parents. We were together for 4 years before he was comfortable letting me meet his family, other than his narcissistic father and his evil stepmother. I met them before we officially started dating, the one time they visited Dan since he moved. In fact, no one else in his family has visited him once. I met everyone when we decided to move back for his job, which was closer to his family, but still about 2 hours away. We lived there for a year, didn't like it for various reasons, and moved back to the state where we met. The next year, we decided to spend Christmas with his family instead of mine for the first time. We spend every holiday with my family, and honestly prefer it that way, especially now. They are great people and love Dan, so other than his general dislike of holidays overall thanks to his parents, he has a good time. So we were invited to stay with his father and evil stepmother during our visit, and we ended up agreeing to do just that. Things seemed to be going well the first couple of days. The evening before Christmas, Dan's stepbrother came over to see us. His father was not feeling well that day, seemingly hungover from drinking the previous night, but he would never admit that. So Dan's father and his evil stepmother stayed inside while we hung out in the garage, which was not attached to their home, so we just didn't disturb them. We were drinking, talking, and playing cornhole together. It was around midnight when the stepbrother went inside to use the bathroom. Apparently, Dan's father and evil stepmother told him to ask us to wrap it up and come inside, which the stepbrother forgot to tell us when he came back out. The next thing we know, Dan's father comes out and begins yelling at us for not listening when he told us to come inside. We were like, okay, it's not that big of a deal, we're coming in. We apparently took too long cleaning up to go inside because before we could, we were met with Dan's father and the evil stepmother standing in their doorway screaming at us for being disrespectful, that we were supposed to be guests in their home and that it was supposedly bedtime, that when they told us to do something, we were supposed to do it right away. They were going off and I began to cry because at this point I still wanted to make a good impression and felt like I had done something wrong. Dan then told me to go inside and start packing our things, which I did. While collecting our toiletries, Dan's stepbrother found me and tried consoling me, saying that I did nothing wrong and that this is just how they are. Then the evil stepmother shows up, saw her son helping me, and just lost her mind. She was yelling at both of us, saying all kinds of horrible things. Dan's stepbrother said, "I'm done with this," and went downstairs where Dan and his father were arguing. He told them he was leaving, and the father then got incredibly verbally aggressive. Dan and his father continued to argue downstairs, while the evil stepmother followed me around upstairs. I was throwing everything into our luggage as she blocked the door of the room that we stayed in. At this point, I wasn't even registering what she was screaming at me because I started having a panic attack. I started having tunnel vision, I couldn't breathe, and I was shaking so badly that I kept dropping things. So I went to the nightstand and took one of my anxiety pills I'm prescribed for emergency purposes. This evil stepmother saw me do this and said to me, "What, you're a pill popper now?" and started to scream other horrible things at me. At this point, I had had just about enough. I snapped and I turned at her and I screamed. I basically told her in not so nice a way to get lost and to leave me alone. This was maybe not the best idea since the evil stepmother is quite a large woman. Not really fat, more like she could have been a decent football linebacker. She started coming in my direction when Dan and his father showed up, having heard our most recent exchange. He managed to get them both out of the room and slammed the door. The evil stepmother opened the door just to try and continue the argument when Dan finally went off and somehow convinced them to leave us alone while we packed. We brought everything downstairs, where the berating and arguments still continued. We tried to call an Uber, but Dan's father refused to let us because he didn't want an Uber driver knowing where he lived. Somehow it turned into Dan's father driving us to a hotel in silence. Later that day, we got our car, put the Christmas presents we bought on their doorsteps, and we left. We went to his older brother's house to see him, his younger brother, and his mother. They didn't seem that surprised by their actions, but they did apologize for them. We got the same reaction when we stopped by his older stepbrother's house as well. Dan's family are good people, but his narcissistic father and evil stepmother are so toxic. What makes me truly sad is that he still has hope that they might change. He still wants to have a relationship with his father and hopes he might come to his senses like his mom did. I'm disgusted with Dan's father and his evil stepmother, and I wish that we could just cut them out of our lives. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. Imagine driving all that way just to then then get screamed at by two people who clearly have some kind of power trip that they wanted to exercise. Like, that is seriously insane. By the way, these people are in their 30s. No rational person would ever be like, you have to listen to what I say simply because you're a guest in my house. Like, sure, there are ground rules, but you can't make me go to bed. Like, that's just not gonna happen. But at least this is a lesson learned that no, you should not spend time with this side of the family. These people are nuts, and honestly, I would not want anything to do with them either. So hopefully for the both of you, these two people play as little of a role in your life as possible, because they are incredibly toxic, and they do not have your best interest in mind. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My entitled professor's tests are way too hard, and it's incredibly difficult for anybody to get a high enough grade, with the class average being about 45%. So at the end of the year, I get malicious, and I leave a bad review for this professor. And it felt great because as a result, he ended up changing how he did his tests. Here's what happened. So this happened while attending a private university in the United States. I was generally very happy with the school and the teachers, with the exception of one. I was always very polite and respectful to the teachers that I thought were doing good at their jobs, or at least doing their very best, if it wasn't what I as an individual responded best to. But this guy that I'm gonna talk about really tested my limits. I was a biology major and had to take 2 semesters of physics. I'm not particularly interested in it, but there are elements that I do find interesting, and while I wasn't excited for the class, I wasn't dreading it too much either. From the beginning, I didn't enjoy the method of teaching he used, but everyone learns differently and I'm fairly adaptable, so I did my best. This was algebra-based physics, which was the usual choice for bio majors, and relied heavily on equations. By the first test, we were expected to have about 10 equations memorized to use on the test. The tests were usually about 5 to 6 questions, each with about 4 parts, so each part would be about 5%. The parts were dependent on each other, so if you couldn't answer part A, you couldn't even attempt parts B, C, or D. The first test nearly had me in tears when I realized that I couldn't even answer half the questions, and was missing out on half the points without even having a chance to try, because I couldn't remember an equation for one of the earlier parts. That was bad enough. Then the first class after the tests were graded, the teacher walked in and began explaining that the test scores were only 20% of your grade, the rest of which was based on homework, lab, and attendance. He told the whole class that if you get low scores on the tests, you can still pass the class. He said that our class average was higher than previous year's averages for the first test, and the average was 45%. My jaw dropped and my heart started racing. He handed back our tests and I got a 25%. I have never scored anything lower than 70% on any test before. I was a B average student. This simply did not happen to me. We had 2 more tests before the final, and each test added about 10 more equations onto the list. So there were about 20 for the second test and 30 for the third. I had disability accommodations for ADHD, so I asked them if they could help me with getting an equation sheet to have during the test, because I'm unable to memorize that many equations. They told me they couldn't help me because they couldn't tell the teacher how to run the class. I asked the teacher about it, and he said that if I understood the material well enough, I would be able to come up with the equations on my own. He was also the department head, and I didn't think anyone above him would take me seriously. So I powered through, crying the whole day. My dad, who is very good at math and physics, helped me out as much as he could. I adapted well enough to start testing in the 60 to 70% range. On the final exam, he provided us with an equation sheet, which was a full page of equations. I don't remember my exact score on the final, but it was around 80%. In the last couple of weeks of class, he told us that he encouraged everyone to participate in the university's anonymous class evaluations, and he would provide extra credit for those who showed him proof that it was completed. And he didn't want to know what was actually written, but simply wanted proof that we did it, as it all was still anonymous. He encouraged us to be thorough and honest, and so I decided, after having so much heartache and so much stress in that stupid class, I was going to enact some malicious compliance. I wrote a scathing yet professional evaluation of the way that he ran his class. It took me an hour to word it properly, and almost ran out of character count on the submission page. No teacher should expect the majority of their students to fail the test. He shouldn't have to weigh the grades so that students still pass even when failing the tests. I learned very little from him, and that's what frustrated me the most. I was being charged almost $40,000 a year to learn, and he was completely useless to me and most of the others in the class. So while I was furious about the whole thing, the malicious malicious compliance of getting 5 extra points for talking garbage about him when he asked us to be thorough was so satisfying that it was the only thing that got me through the last week of that semester and finals. I heard from another student who took his class the next semester that he told them he had changed a few things about the class based on the feedback that he got. I never knew how much it changed or if it really was for the better, but it sure was satisfying to hear that my feedback got to him. I still think about him sometimes and it still upsets me because he ran his class in such an ineffective way and it honestly all felt like such a big waste of time. Yeah, that teacher really does seem like a complete moron. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he knew that his tests were really terrible and that the way he was conducting them was completely counterintuitive. I mean, just look at his grading system. Only 20% of your grade would come from the test. So obviously there was some kind of problem going on here. They were way too hard, there was too much to memorize, and it didn't account for all the other classes that these students would be taking. And from the sounds of it, that's just an undergrad class. Like seriously, this guy needed a wake-up call. So good for the original poster for not only getting that extra credit, but also putting this guy in their place. Because this professor was making things harder than they needed to be. And if he had just made things a little bit simpler for an intro course, he probably could have avoided this negative feedback. An entitled man demands to go shopping on Christmas, despite the fact that we're about to close the store and we are politely asking him to leave. But he simply isn't having it, as he throws a temper tantrum that I honestly didn't think that a grown man could throw. Here's what happened. So I work for the blue store with a yellow spark and have for 10 years, starting as an overnight temp, but now work for the online department of a different store, mainly because it was closer to my at the time fiancé than the hour-long drive it would have taken one way. I had been working in the bakery and deli department, and as many know, the store closes the deli department at around 9 o'clock or so, to give the associates time to get the department cleaned for the morning crew the next day. As it was well before the pandemic by a good 5 or 6 years, the store only had one day where the doors were not open to anyone, and that was Christmas. Back then, the store I had moved to was a 24-hour store, as opposed to the smaller one that I started in that was only open between 6 a.m. and midnight. The new store, which is the one I still work in, would be closed to the public by 8 o'clock Christmas Eve, and wouldn't reopen to the public until 6 a.m. the next day after Christmas. Reasonable enough to allow the associates to spend time with their families on one day of the year. This particular Christmas Eve, I was working the closing shift at the deli, so from 11:15 until 8:15 that night, and as we got to 6 p.m., we closed our department. Standard procedure was to have one person in the back to wash the pans and cooking components of the hot side. One person would clean the hot side, and the rest, usually 2 or 3, would clean the slicers on the cold cut side. It was going on almost 7:45. The announcement that we were closing soon emitted from the PA system, and asset protection was stationed near the doors to start turning people away as we closed, and I was busy cleaning up one of the slicers. It was then that we heard a commotion in the front of the store. Now, the thing of it was that the deli was right at the front, just off to the side near the registers, so we were about to get front row seats to this amazing piece of drama. Apparently, a man decided 10 to 15 minutes before closing that he absolutely needed to go to Walmart to shop. However, as he approached the store, he was stopped by AP and told that the store was closing and that new shoppers would have to wait until Christmas to do their shopping. His response was to rather loudly complain that Walmart never closes. He then barged through and began to argue with the AP about how Walmart should not be closed. Walmart never closes, and how this was such a general inconvenience to him. It was this tirade he was spewing to security as he rounded this corner, and I saw him for the first time, and he looked in our direction. I will never forget what he said next, mainly because of the tone of his voice. Because as he was working and throwing his temper tantrum as a grown-up, he loudly proclaimed, "Even the deli is closed. Why on earth is the deli closed?" He said this as if we even had the audacity to not remain open so as to cater to his every whim. I just gave a look that basically said, hey, we're not the ones that made the schedule or the rules, but we are following what we need to do, and I would like to go home to spend time with my family. I went back to work just as one of my co-workers by the name of Rob, that's not his real name, poked his head out from the back where he was doing dishes to see what was going on. The man was stopped from continuing into the store by members of AP, as well as management, then escorted out of the store. I would like to think that hopefully he was banned for all time, but I can't be sure, because I never really asked, and it has been 6 or 7 years since this occurred, but I keep getting reminded of this man, and how he needed to shop at literally the last minute minute on Christmas Eve, and that if we didn't do this, this was honestly just gonna be a big problem. How obnoxious can you get? I mean, seriously, it's Christmas Eve and you wanna go shopping? Not to mention to Walmart of all places? Is this guy seriously on something? Like, why would you wanna go there? And how does this guy seriously not understand that maybe just once a year, people should have the right to spend time with their family, especially around the holidays such as Christmas? This guy can't possibly expect everybody and their mother to still want to work on a holiday that is typically taken off and used as a day where you just spend time with your family and just relax, if anything. So hopefully this guy's attitude straightens out in the future, because expecting people to drop everything that they're doing just to serve you in the most inconvenient time possible is simply not fair for the workers. My entitled parents refuse to believe that I can speak Mandarin, and no matter how much I try to convince them that yes, this is something I can do, they simply won't accept it, and instead just think that I'm being naive, and I honestly don't know what to do. Okay, so this is a weirder one, but it really hurts my feelings. For the past 7 years, I've been studying Mandarin Chinese, 4 years of it by myself. Then when I got to a new high school, I began taking their classes. I started at Mandarin 3 and breezed through it to 4, and now I'm dual enrolled in a local university, and I'm taking advanced Mandarin 1 and pursuing an associate's degree in Mandarin language and literature. I'm very proud of myself. Languages are my biggest passion in my life. In the time I've been learning Mandarin, I've also been studying Arabic and Thai, and have lower intermediate levels in both. My Arabic is good, but my Mandarin is definitely my best language other than English. The thing is, my parents don't believe that I speak it. In fact, when I mention being multilingual, they audibly scoff or attempt to call me out for lying. I'm taking a bilingual SEAL test this coming March to verify my fluency, or at least my literacy in Mandarin, and I get good grades in my college Chinese classes, but they just don't believe me. If they don't believe in my best language, then you're absolutely right, they don't believe in my other two. I get they're very skeptical people, but when I try to talk to them about my languages, they frequently interrupt me, telling me they genuinely just don't believe I speak it. And it's not like they're an authority on this anyways. My mother only speaks English, and my father failed French in high school. They also both think that Arabic is an ugly language, and they can't stand to hear me speak it. So it's not like they would want to listen to me to prove myself anyways. They say the only way they'd ever believe I'm actually multilingual is if a native speaker told them that I was fluent in their language, and that just hurts. It's like denying the 7 years I've put into this skill that I'm very proud of, by the way, and just calling me a naive kid. I don't know how to express this, because I feel like they would put down my emotions like they're just trying to be good parents, and not delude me into thinking I'm better than I actually am. It hurts my feelings big time. The only times they're really proud of me are when I pursue skills they themselves have. For example, I'm taking a class in accounting, which is my father's career, and he thinks that's a very good idea, unlike my unprofitable degree of choice. I don't know what to do here. I'm not too keen on going out and finding my Mandarin friends and taking them to give a grade report to my parents, just so they can believe me. That feels childish, and it honestly is so frustrating, and I simply don't know what to do. Your parents are incredibly toxic, and I bet if anything, they're just jealous that you can learn another language, but they're too stupid to learn it themselves. That is such a sad state of affairs. Here they have a child who has spent the last 7 years of their life dedicated to learning not only Mandarin, but also Thai and Arabic, which, by the way, all three of those languages are not simple. They're not easy ones to pick up, and it takes a lot of practice just to be good at it. So the fact that you've gotten this far and you've learned so much and you've gotten so much practice out of it is probably the best kind of validation you could ever get out of this, because you yourself know who you are, you know what you're capable of, and you know for a fact that you can speak these languages. And for the sake of your own dignity and your own self-respect, I would not bring anybody around just to validate how they feel about this. Because even if you did bring somebody around who could prove and say yes, they know this language really well, they could even try and invalidate that person and try and claim that no, this is all set up and you don't actually know any of this. With the way these people sound and the way they're acting, I wouldn't be surprised if it took you going to mainland China itself just to prove to them that yes, I know how to speak this language, and I'm your only hope of having any kind of translator for this trip. The point I'm trying to make is that you need to do this for you and not for your parents. They clearly have shown their true colors for what you're interested in, and they are not being supportive of your decisions in the slightest, which, by the way, they're your decisions. You shouldn't have to take accounting just to appeal to your father. And personally, there are tons of jobs where people people could use translators to make massive business deals or even help translate for political leaders or stuff like that. There are so many avenues you can go with this language, it's not even funny. If anything, it's only going to be towards your advantage moving forward. So don't worry about your parents, get your associate's degree and live your life. Because even if they choose not to acknowledge your skills in these languages, your future job opportunities will be enough validation for you moving forward with your life. Because this honestly will only be for your benefit moving forward. My crazy entitled mother makes a false police report just to try and get me in trouble, but it all backfired really quickly as the cops showed up to her house ready to confront her about her terrible actions. Here's what happened. So this literally just happened. It's 9:41 in the morning here on the East Coast on a Sunday morning, and I was woken up at 5:58 a.m. this morning by 6 police officers at my door. I heard my doorbell ring and immediately panicked. I was afraid they were coming to tell me something bad had taken place, but apparently my mom called the police department and told them my house was on fire. Now, for some backstory, I walked out on my mom and grandma about 6 months ago. I spent my teenage years being my grandma's caretaker, dropping out of school, and even dealt with them using my social security number to acquire things on credit that they never paid for. I finally got most of that fixed, but not without angering them. My mom looked at it like I was ruining my grandma's reputation. When I walked out, it left my grandma's children, 3 sons and my mom, to finally take care of her, and they all went ballistic on me because apparently it was my responsibility. They started calling my job, having wellness checks done, and trying to get my husband arrested. This morning when I opened the door, an officer was standing there and said to me that they had gotten a very quick and abrupt 911 call stating there was a fire at my address. I told him I had just woken up and that nothing was wrong. I had my phone on hand and I showed him that I hadn't called anyone today. He then read off a number to me and asked who that might be, and I immediately knew who it was. I explained the situation to them and the officers got angry as there were 6 of them in total. The officer asked why my family was doing this and I told him. He said he was going to check into it and would call me back. He called back at around 8:30 in the morning. He said he'd made contact with my mom and grandma and they immediately got defensive. He says he's going to see about pressing charges against them for abuse of emergency services, and that when he told them this, they started blaming me, trying to deflect back to me somehow. Apparently, my grandma even asked if the officer thought it was right I wasn't helping her. The officer told her I was an adult with a right to my own life and that they couldn't impede on that right in any way, shape, or form. Apparently, my grandma mentioned her nephew who works as a prosecutor for the state and said that she would be calling him about this. The officer told her to go ahead, that his body camera had recorded everything, and then grandma got upset about being recorded. I told this officer that they've done everything they can to intimidate me just to try and get me to return home, and he said he told them that harassing someone because they won't do what they ask is also a crime. Now, my grandma doesn't like it when people tell her she isn't above the law, and now I've gotten a shield order issued, meaning that law enforcement won't come to my house unless I call them. The officer also said that he'd be in touch with the magistrate about my husband filing charges against these 2 for trying to get him arrested under false pretenses and slander because they put lies on social media about him. Guys, I'm just done with this. I have lived the last 6 months of my life in fear, waiting for the police to come at night. It's a small town, so thankfully this morning, the officer is a new recruit and young, as the older officers have been more sympathetic towards my grandma. This is all so messy and I honestly don't know what to do. Your grandma and extended family are absolutely crazy. There are so many red flags in this story, it really just keeps piling on top of the other. For one, the fact that you're a teenager and you had to drop out of school just to take care of your grandma is seriously twisted. I mean, they even use your social security number just to get things on credit that they never paid for. Like, that is a crazy level of fraud, and there's no excuse for that. Also, your aunts and uncles absolutely should be stepping up to take care of your grandma. That should not be your responsibility. You are quite literally just the grandkid in this situation, and your grandma's children absolutely need to step up and get things done. There's no good reason for you to put your life on hold just so your aunts and uncles can run around and basically do whatever they want. But you know what? Despite all the crazy things that they put you and your husband through, the police finally caught up with them and they messed up big time. Making a false police report like that is going to land them in some serious hot water. Not to mention the fact that the police officer had that all on recording, and if things escalate from here, you can bet he's going to be using that in the court of law against these weirdos. So if anything, let that be a silver lining. These people have finally been caught in the act of treating you like garbage, as well as trying to ruin your life. So if anything, I'm really happy for you guys because this might be the beginning of the end of their weird antics. So hopefully there's a way out of this weird situation and you're able to get away from these creepy family members who are actively trying to ruin your life because they just crossed a line that they won't soon be able to cross back from. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My wife gave me an ultimatum that if we want to have a child together, then I need to stop working at my office and start working from home. And I'm not sure how to proceed and I really don't know what to do. So my wife and I have been married for 5 years and we dated 3 years prior. So in total, we've been together for about 8 years. We have no children yet, but have often discussed having one. We bought a house 2 years ago while we still both worked remotely as we needed space and honestly, it was time to own a property. Last year, I changed jobs and ended up working at a big tech company. My job pays well, but I'm required to come to the office 2 or 3 days every week. And this is a big shift from the fully remote work that I was doing. This has caused many arguments between us, as my wife says that she's unfairly stuck with certain chores. And these are things that we would both normally be doing, like groceries or laundry or general cleaning throughout the week. And if I worked from home, I would still be doing these things and helping out. We both make roughly about the same income, though her field is completely different from mine, and she is 100% remote. Other arguments have come up because she doesn't like how friendly one of my female coworkers is. She overheard a conversation with my friend, who also works at my company, and he said that she's pretty stunning, considering the other women in this field. And ever since she heard that, she has been paranoid ever since. She will casually ask me about my day when I'm in the office, and has gotten annoyed if I mention the pretty coworker. So I've stopped doing that and generally just hang out with the other guys on the team. She got really upset recently because during one of her work from home days, I had my Teams up and she saw the female coworker send over a heart emoji in association with some of my comments in the chat about work. She started questioning why the thumbs up emoji wasn't sufficient enough. All this backstory is to say that last night we were talking about our 5-year plan and where a baby would fit into it. She asked me if I planned to stay at my job or if I was looking at a different company altogether. I told her I didn't know. It pays really well and the team is pretty laid back, but I obviously don't enjoy being in the office, nor do I find it necessary for my field. She was sort of guiding the conversation for me to say I'd leave my job in the next year or two. I kept saying I really didn't know, and she then said, well, honestly, I don't see us having a baby with me just stuck at home all by myself all day with it. If we're going to do this, I want you to be working remotely as well. Then the responsibility is more equally shared. So basically, she gave me an ultimatum that if I want a baby with her, I need to find a fully remote job again. It's not an issue to do so. My field is littered with these kinds of jobs, but I feel that her motives aren't completely pure. I asked her if it was really about sharing the baby responsibilities or if it was about me being at work with other women. She admitted that it would be even more annoying to her if she was stuck at home all day with a baby while I was getting all this attention from some single attention-seeking homewrecker instead of being a father. She said that she's tired of mother being a woman's identity forever after having a baby, but men aren't always seen as fathers and can do whatever we want. I am processing this, but I need some outside perspective. I really want a child, and I definitely want it with her, but I am worried about having to find a new job and what that means for us as a couple if it's partly because of her insecurity over a pretty coworker. I'm not sure what to do or how to proceed. She seemed pretty adamant that if we are having a baby, we both need to work remotely. What should I do? This is kind of weird because it sounds like your wife is letting her insecurities about you and your coworkers dictate your future for the next 5 years. Like, that just doesn't add up in my opinion. It would be different if there was some kind of history here where you were unfaithful with your wife, so she has like legitimate reason to be concerned that you might do it again, but it doesn't sound like you're doing that. It sounds like you're a functioning adult who has a job and your wife is being unnecessarily paranoid about a pretty coworker. Like, that lady could very easily quit tomorrow, like you never know. Or you could even start working in a different sector of your job. Like, there's a lot of things that could happen, so for her to basically make a plan of like, okay, you're gonna quit your job and work remotely all because I don't like this lady that you work with is, in my opinion, a massive overreaction. And I'm also really confused why the chores aren't already split up equally. Like, sure, some chores are easier to do when you're at home and you work from home, but there's no reason why you can't like have a schedule and figure that out all together. Like, the original poster even implied that you both work the same amount of hours and you earn the same money. So sharing these responsibilities, I really don't think is that big of a deal. And especially when it comes to the baby, I think you just need to explain to her that you're going to step up to the plate plate and be the father that she needs you to be when you are working from home. Like, obviously that's going to be a completely different dynamic from house chores, and I can completely understand where she's coming from. So hopefully this all works out for you, and hopefully you don't have to quit your job just to work from home. I really don't think that would be fair for you in the slightest, and I think there has to be some kind of middle ground that both of you can come to and try and agree on. My entitled professor makes me sign a weird contract for the class I'm taking, but I get malicious, and I find a workaround where I don't have to take the final but still get a good grade in her class, and I've honestly never been more satisfied in my life. So last semester, I had to take a class from a professor who wasn't bad as being incompetent, but definitely was one of those professors where they tried some new way of teaching that they really needed to develop, and you just happened to be caught in their crossfire. She also gave the vaguest instructions on what she did want in her turned-in work and didn't believe in study guides, as she wanted to encourage reading the material. Honestly, I got more out of the book than her class, and buying the book alone would have been far cheaper. Trying to get direction out of this lady was worse than trying to pull teeth, and was mostly met with her just saying for us to do our best. On top of this, she apparently handed out a grading contract on the first day, giving this out to everyone and making us sign it and return it. I missed this due to being sick, so I didn't get it until later. The said contract basically boiled down to indicating what grade you wanted at the start of the semester. You either met the conditions for that grade or you would fail. So basically, by saying you wanted an A, you either met the qualifications for an A or you would fail, even if you would have gotten a B or a C instead. If you decided to play it safe with saying that you wanted a C, even if you excelled and would normally get a B or an A, you would instead get that C. So to cut out a lot of the drama of the semester, two things really need to be covered first. The first one being that I had surgery at the beginning of the semester, and the second is that I was working full-time while at school to pay for said school. Both ended up with me missing a lot of work, and normally I would just cut my losses, except I'm very close to my degree, and my professor said I could make up the work. Otherwise, I would fail and need to retake the class anyway in the spring. So I decided that I had nothing to lose, and I buckled down with basically getting next to no sleep for weeks. I had about a month and a half worth of work that needed to be completed within about 2 weeks. Now finally, this is where my malicious compliance comes in. During an exchange where I was emailing my work, she told me I still hadn't done her contract, which at that point, only a few weeks out from finals, I didn't get the point. But she told me either I did the contract or I would fail. She also had let slip that not doing the final would drop you a letter grade, but not fail you. The only exception to her weird contract that wasn't in it, and one I confirmed very deliberately in writing. At this point, I was bone tired, and honestly, I was forcing myself to continue working on anything, which may not sound like much, but with my mental health history, this was a Herculean effort. I just wanted the pain to stop, and I just wanted to get a full night's rest. So I decided if not doing the final just dropped me by a letter grade, then I would just do the work for a B and end up with a grade I thought was fair for how the semester had gone. This meant for even more work, but it also meant I didn't need to worry about a final and could finally just sleep, which I explained as much to the professor when she asked me why I didn't have a final turned in on the last day of school. And that so far has been the last I ever spoke to or have ever seen this lady. Imagine my surprise when I actually ended up with a B in her class. Personally, I take this to be her never wanting me in her class again, and I'm not sure if this makes me a jerk overall, but I do know she apparently has it now that not doing the final is an automatic D, so sorry to anyone who came after me, but I clearly got away with something that she didn't like. That teacher sounds super obnoxious. The fact that she makes you sign some kind of arbitrary contract just to try and lock you into a grade that you may or may not get is really toxic, and that is such an awful way to run a class. Like, why would you punish people for doing better or worse? Why not just give them the grade that they earned? So I honestly don't blame the original poster for being like, you know what, I'm not showing up for the final. Why should I? Just give me the letter grade deduction and let me be on my way. So good for you for getting away with something that probably really annoyed her, because this professor sounds awful, and she clearly has no idea what she's doing. My wife's life is slowly being ruined by a toxic friend from her past, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my wife and I have been together for 1 year. She recently told me that I have been bossing her around, talking down to her, and exploding over small things. I have noticed that I have been irritable, but I hadn't realized that my behavior towards her had changed. She basically told me to get my stuff together or she would leave. I apologized and said I would stop acting this way. The problem is I haven't, and in the moment, I don't even realize I'm doing it. I'm struggling to understand my behavior since I've never treated her this way before ever. Sure, sure I've been irritable and overreacted to small confrontations during really stressful times, but it's usually pretty obvious that's what's going on, and I can see it as it happens. But this time is different. Simply getting my stuff together isn't working, and I feel I need to understand where this is coming from in order to resolve it. Having gone through recent events, the only thing I can think of that coincides with the change in behavior is that she recently let a toxic friend back into her life. The friend in question is one that she's known all her life, since they were in kindergarten. The friend has a history of belittling my wife and generally acting very toxic towards her. She has done a number on her self-esteem throughout her life and was the direct cause of many mental health issues that my wife experienced when she was younger. Last year, they cut contact when the friend told my wife that her problems made the friend feel sick and that her messages were pathetic and disgusting. She told her that she'd never lead a normal life and that I was only with her out of pity. Needless to say, this led to a massive fight and subsequently to no contact between them. In the following months, my wife was struggling with the loss of this friend and on numerous occasions wanted to call her to apologize. I supported her in this time and helped to push through the grief, eventually to a point where she was happy that the last toxic person was out of her life. Since then, she has made massive improvements on her well-being. She's gained a lot of weight, having been severely underweight due to an eating disorder. She quit smoking and was told by her family, friends, schoolmates, and myself that she had brightened up so much that she looked like a completely different person. Her family especially have been ecstatic to see the improvement in her, given all the hard times that they have seen her endure. Anyway, my wife recently got a new phone and had forgotten to block said friend on it. It had simply been out of her mind for so long. The friend then texts her shortly after New Year's. She says that she regrets how it ended between them and that she wants to be a part of her life again. Immediately, my wife starts having anxiety over this. She didn't answer this friend, but she couldn't focus on her studies, and she eventually starts smoking again and has nightmares daily until she finally responds. In order to somehow end the misery, it leads to a phone call between them where the friend says that my wife can't just cut her out when they've known each other for so long. When my wife tells her how the friend's behavior has affected her, she proceeds to put the entire blame on my wife and says that if she has a problem with anything the friend does, then she should have said something in the moment. She can't be held responsible if she's not told that her behavior is unacceptable. This line of reasoning seems absolutely insane to me, given the fact that the things she says are objectively cruel. No one would need to be told that telling people they're disgusting and won't ever have a normal relationship is messed up. But my wife's take on it was that the friend was right and that it was all her own fault because she didn't stand up to the friend in the moment. And when she said this, I was livid. I must admit that I reacted pretty poorly in this situation. I've never met the friend in person, but I hate her with a fury, and I didn't hold back telling my wife what I felt about the friend. Eventually, we calmed down and agreed that my wife should talk with more people than just me about continuing the relationship with this person. Now, everyone, and I mean literally everyone that she talked to, said that she should ghost her and block her immediately. Her mother, her sisters, her friends, counselors, everyone told her that this person was bad for her and that she should not pursue it. My wife even admitted to herself, and I thought that this would finally be the end of it, but it turns out it wasn't. Instead, it turns out that she had started lying and was talking to the friend in secret. Eventually, I found out, and she made me promise not to tell her family. She also accused me of being controlling and that I had no say in who she chooses to talk to. I do agree with the fact that you can't control other people's relationships, and I apologized and said that, of course, she knows what's best for her, and if this is her mistake to make, she's allowed to make it. What has been nagging me since then is that she regularly gives little updates on how much the friend has changed and how sweet she is now. But a few days later, it always turns out that the things she's praising the friend for didn't actually happen that way, and what was actually said was in reality very different and significantly more judgmental and negative. It's weird because when she admits that the friend was actually being toxic again, it's like she knows, but then forgets again the day after, explaining it away as if she probably just misunderstood what was happening. In my view, the friend is just playing nice, while slowly reintroducing the old patterns, and my wife is in complete denial about it. This is around the time when I started acting on her again. In some of the arguments, I've called her pathetic for starting smoking again. In her words, apparently I would boss her around like she can't think for herself. I've stopped spending time with her, and I'm constantly busy with other stuff. During one of the times when it turned out the sweet things the friend said was actually really judgmental and dismissive, I remember thinking that she was weak, and I felt contempt. I think it's wrong of me to feel that way, but even though I consciously agree that it's her mistake to make and that I can't and shouldn't even try to force her actions, I can't help to feel that she's less than what she used to be. I don't understand her reasoning for continuing a relationship with this person after everything she's done, as well as with all the proof that she clearly hasn't changed. Now, I'm lying to her family about the two of them talking, and I don't feel good about that either. It's like I'm enabling her in some kind of way. I want to be compassionate and understanding, but on the inside, I'm fuming. She doesn't deserve to be treated badly by me for this, but I don't know what I can do to get past these feelings. Maybe I'm being selfish and irrational, but I can't talk to her family about it, and I can't say anything to my friends or family either, not without revealing too much about her personal history. I don't know how to get out of this cycle. What should I do? I think this is such a terrible situation to be stuck in. Like, clearly she is absolutely in denial, and it really is disturbing that she just can't see truth in this situation. This friend is clearly treating her like garbage, and they are absolutely trying to drag your wife back into an awful situation and an awful friendship. And this can hardly even be called a friendship, to be completely honest with you. No friend would say the things that this person has said to your wife. I mean, it really is disturbing. So hopefully you can have some kind of conversation with her and try to have some kind of intervention in general, maybe even getting a therapist involved. Because unfortunately, as you already know, you can't control what she does, and you can't control the people that she spends time around. And hopefully you or somebody else is able to break through to her and help her see that this friend is definitely not good for her. My entitled family tried to force me to move out of my house so my entitled older brother can move into it, claiming that I don't need this much space to begin with and that I would be better off living in the camper outside. Here's what happened. So I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29 and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22 and the second followed a year later, then the third 2 years after that, and the fourth is most recently born a couple of months ago. His wife and I do not get along, as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior, then turns into an extremely self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliated against her in any way. She can cry in an instant and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't really care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that, but she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day, so their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house, and privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We are 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything, unless people called them out on it, which did happen a fair bit by my other family members, which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays, since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got awful towards me physically on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point where she broke up with me and laughed at any misfortune that I had, and my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas, because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama, so my parents did their best to hide what was really going on and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out, because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out, but honestly, couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation, but I really didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brothers on holidays, just like the rest of the family. The start of the 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew the lease on my then condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life until that life wasn't kind to me, and I realize I should have been living somewhere much cheaper, so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck, just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it would cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park a camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could until I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price that they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And my sister-in-law thought it was absolutely hilarious that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at it and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck and camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go, as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were apartment people. I was pretty attached to my area as well, so I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to my friend's apartment. It was the only way that I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars to people who were addicted to substances to people demanding that I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone who told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned them, what HOA are you talking about? They got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around, plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cool. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone, but I didn't have anything like a generator, and generators are noisy and require fuel anyways, so I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again, though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money, but I had no stable place to live while receiving it, and I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse, in old employee parking spaces. Literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss and company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time that I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug the camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had a shower at a friend's apartment or at my local gym, as the camper didn't have a shower in it and only had a portable toilet, and I didn't want to fill it because emptying it was a nasty chore, so I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with a night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a used portable AC unit just to try and make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay and hands-on learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor and started making a better salary than my old job. And that's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property, but I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So I put it there as its own building, just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces, if you know what I mean. My family saw the post, and that's where things went absolutely horrible. After a few weeks, my parents and brother, along with his family, came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them the address. So how they found where I live, I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really would not surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like a bunch of rambunctious tourists, then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and my sister-in-law had this creepy smirk that she kept sending my way, and it was only later that I figured out why, and it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now, and it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. And okay, I don't have one now, but maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. It was red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone, and I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4, and my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in the outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes and even curfews, and that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think that the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago, thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way on earth I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily, but certainly not him or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact same kind of situation in videos online many times, and never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it was so ludicrous. But my parents, brother, and sister-in-law do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissists who are clearly entitled and kinda crazy. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording, and then I just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. And it was right then that I finally decided to show my backbone, and I told him absolutely not. And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by my parents if I ever did that. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs, and acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the home and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that's total BS because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids and I don't need all the space, so I may as well just give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything, and he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this and that I will. And that's when I yelled at him and said, as if their word was law or something, and told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then, right on cue, my parents and sister-in-law barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting, but to sum it up, from this point on, I heard the line, "Just do it for Dan," way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them they all don't have a say in my life or my house, and then I told them to get out before I call the cops. My sister-in-law screamed at me the loudest about how she was pregnant again and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her. She just assumed that she could take and take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligations to her or her family. I then called her a stuck-up brat who never had any respect for me, so I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to try and attack me. So there was a shuffle back and forth, but the phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan that they were leaving. Then my mother said I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be and to not come back. Then I told my sister-in-law that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I will press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly, crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and my sister-in-law, but I responded by saying that I won't be doing any sort of thing anytime soon. What an absolute roller coaster. The original poster has been through so much. They went from living in a camper for a while to then saving up all this money just to try and buy their own place. And now their entitled family is jumping all over them again, basically trying to kick this guy out and force him to live back in that camper again. And that is so unbelievably toxic and so not fair. He worked so hard for this. He went through so many trials and tribulations. He absolutely earned this house. So it's absolutely backwards that they would try and kick him out of it. I mean, how entitled do you have to be to not only show up to somebody's house, but try and coerce them into getting out of that house? And this is after they treated him so poorly and forced him to move his camper off their property. So good for the original poster for standing up for themselves, because this type of behavior is so inappropriate, and this guy will honestly be so much better off without dealing with these people in his life. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled Karen claims that I'm faking my illness, claiming that I stole the medicine I used to manage my pain and that I'm some kind of corrupt liar just looking for attention. But when she said that, I wasn't going to take that sitting down. So I marched right back over to her and I put her in her place. Here's what happened. So this happened about 4 or 5 years ago. For some context, I was about 18 years old at the time, and I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my left knee. It's a degenerative form of arthritis, and my case was severe. It was a constant thing, and I would be in excruciating pain and taking painkillers to make it a little less painful. My doctor, a few weeks prior, instructed me to stay off my leg and use crutches, wear a knee brace, and also prescribed me a heavy painkiller medication. Well, one day I was on my way home from another checkup, and it was around lunchtime. I had to take the medicine every 24 hours with a meal, so I stopped by Burger King to eat and then take my medication before my pain would return. A clerk carried my tray to the table and got my drink for me. I sit down and place my medication bottle on the tray so I don't forget to take it. So as I'm eating, across the room is the entitled Karen and her kid of the story. As I'm eating, she gives me a death stare, and I'm not sure why, but I choose to just ignore her. So I'm eating my food, and then I took my medication after I finished. I get up to take my tray to the trash, which is right behind her. The clerk was taking an order and couldn't help me with my stuff, so I put both my crutches under one of my arms and carried my trash over to the trash can. I get over there and I dump it, and as I'm trying to figure out how to carry my drink out, the entitled Karen speaks up to me in a semi-sarcastic tone. She says to me, "What's wrong with you?" Now, at this point, I'm used to being asked this, so I answered calmly and said, "I have severe osteoarthritis, and it's very painful and hard to walk." This entitled Karen then said something I absolutely never expected, and I was completely blown away when she said something so vile as this. She actually looked at me and said, "I bet you're faking." I looked at her confused and I said, "Excuse me?" She then said, "You're probably doing this for attention. I bet you those pills aren't even yours. I know all you college kids are just addicts. You are a terrible influence for the younger generation." At this point, she was obviously referring to her young son, who looked completely embarrassed. I didn't go to college, but I think she was basically saying that as another way of saying young adult. I was flabbergasted by what she just said. I suffered through severe pain and struggled to do even simple tasks. She literally does not know what she's talking about. I look at her and I say, "Ma'am, what do I have to gain from doing all this? I suffer from severe pain and it makes makes me feel useless, as well as a burden to everyone. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I do. This entitled Karen then says, "Yeah, right, you liar. You're just an addict and stole those pills, and you're just faking all of this so you don't get caught." At this point, I was upset, so I grabbed my ID and my pill bottle and I slammed it on the table in front of her. I looked at her and I said, "Read it and weep." She took a minute to read the pill bottle and my ID and looked at me to compare my face to the picture, and her face went pale when she realized that she was wrong. She looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry. I apologize." I responded by saying, "I know a lot of people my age are like that, but don't just make assumptions based on stereotypes. You're basically telling your kid it's alright to judge others based on their stereotypes. Now have a good day." And after I said that, she didn't say another word, but instead she just looked down absolutely defeated. A clerk ran over to help me carry out my drink and hold the door. As we walked out, he asked what happened, so I told him everything, with them eventually helping me into my car. He then says for me to wait a minute. He runs inside and returns with a gift card for $10 as some kind of apology, and that he is going to go talk to this lady. I thanked him for all that he did, and then I left. So hopefully I never have to deal with someone like that ever again. The entitled Karen in this story is seriously a massive jerk. Like, how could you possibly treat someone like that? She seriously looked at somebody in crutches who just so happened to be young at the time and say to them, "You know what? You're faking it." Like, what's wrong with you? Why would anybody in their right mind look at someone and make that kind of assumption? That is seriously so toxic and disgusting. And you know what? If I was in the original poster's shoes, I probably would have gone off a lot more than this person did. I mean, they were a lot nicer than I would have been if this lady said, "Oh, you're faking your injury." Like, no lady, I've got pills with my name on it. And just like the original poster, I would feel the same way. I gain nothing by faking my illness. Like, this doesn't help me in any way, and I really just don't like it. Why would I want this? So good for you for standing up for yourself. Because that entitled Karen was completely out of line. But even with her snarky remarks, you handled it like a pro. My entitled family breaks into my home, attempting to give my house to my older brother and his family, all while forging fake rental documents, claiming to the police that I agreed to rent my house to my brother. But I wasn't taking this sitting down, as I got the police involved and showed evidence that they were lying, with me threatening to press charges if they didn't leave my house. Here's what happened. So this story is an update to a previous story we covered on the channel, where the original poster's family tried to force him to give over his house to his brother and entitled sister-in-law, and as a result, he kicked them out and threatened to call the police if they ever showed up again. Here's what happened next. After I kicked my parents, brother, and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately went to my social media and told the whole story to the whole family. It spread pretty fast, but you won't find it now because it all got deleted some time ago, and I put my own profile on private. I posted about it because I knew that the first thing my family would do when they got home is try to twist the event to make me the villain. And I was exactly right, but I had about an hour to get started before them, and I had video evidence to back up my story about what they had done. And before anyone asked me, no, I don't plan on showing the video anytime soon. Being preemptive worked because I got a fair number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law must have been all set to write their own post, but it was too late, so they didn't even bother trying to lie much. My parents, Dan, and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys supporting them, but not much else. Plenty of others knew how entitled they already were. So what happened was something they all quickly understood and accepted. There was one person in particular that called me. I don't know who they were, but they ranted at me that I was a horrible brother and that I needed to make way for a real family man, or whatever that means. I just ended the call and blocked the number. The week went by and my parents showed up with Dan at my front porch, just like they said they would in their prior ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and also pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened it just a crack and they tried to shove their way in again, but I'd installed a couple of latch chains that prevented it and even braced my body against the door for good measure. My father and brother demanded that I let them in, but I said I was recording everything on camera and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down and then, in her most sickly sweet tone, asked me if I was ready to let my brothers move in. I told her and the rest of them to get lost and to never come back. My mother put on the crocodile tears and asked me why I can't just do this for Dan, because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and then bluntly said I do not love him as a brother because he treated me like garbage for years, and they only encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents, and he is a terrible brother. I then told told them to leave or I would be calling the police as soon as possible. They all left surprisingly early, apart from my mother's loud crying and the others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over, but I guess I should have taken them more seriously because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother's minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family and they were moving stuff in. He just waved at me with this horrible grin when I saw him. I was furious and told him and the rest of the family to stop, but my sister-in-law smugly said to me that like it or not, they are moving in. And then in the most fake way while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said that it was okay because my mommy allowed it and that I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I was seething with rage just from hearing those words and looking at her smug, ugly face. So I locked myself in my truck and I called the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, my sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop and that I can't do this to her because she and Dan need the house. And she cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" And I responded, "Forget Dan, it's my house, not his." Then she threatened to key the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police, all of which the 911 operator heard due to the window being slightly open. I told my sister-in-law if she damaged my truck, I would sue her, and she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan and my sister-in-law, along with their kids, had locked themselves in my house. I told the cops what had happened, as well as showing them my new driver's license that had my current address on it. Then when we went to my front door, I saw they changed the lock, and the old lock was laying on the porch with the center of it drilled out, and the drill they used was laying right next to it, with a complete Harbor Freight drill set in tow. I pointed out the broken lock and drill, then gave the police a rundown on all the events that happened prior. Well, I guess Dan called our parents over at some point after I arrived home, because they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied and started saying that I had agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I said that was an easily provable lie one way or another. So Dan and my sister-in-law finally came out of my house with some papers in hand. They both looked surprisingly smug, like they'd somehow outsmarted me. They had actually drawn up and printed out a fake rental agreement, but my signature was not on it. There was a signature, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever actually seen my signature, so that was incredibly stupid on their part. I told my parents and Dan that was stupidly, blatantly fraud, and if cops investigated, they would easily figure that out. And I don't think going to jail and court would do them any good. It could even make Dan lose his job, which is his only means of providing for his family. I also said I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost, stolen, or broken, and that I would call CPS too for good measure. Dan went white and looked really scared when I said all that, but my mother got between us and doubled down about how I should just do this for Dan and live in the camper out back just so they can finally have a family home to themselves. I yelled at her that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could do it for Dan herself and let Dan have her house to himself instead. The cops separated my mother from me, and I said I wanted them all out right now or I'll be pressing charges. I stated in a shout about how they drilled out my front door lock just to break in. The lease papers were obviously fake, they badly forged my signature, and I have recorded video of my sister-in-law attacking me. Those are all felonies that I could ruin their lives with if I wanted to. And if they didn't leave, that's exactly what I would do. The only reason I hadn't already was for the sake of Dan's kids, so they only have one chance to get out. The moment my parents heard that, I think it finally clicked that they could not force me to do it for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she'd put an end to this. Then she went over to my sister-in-law and spoke with her quietly for a minute while my father spoke to Dan. My sister-in-law instantly started loudly crying and ripping up the fake rental papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, only to have an officer tell them to pick up the bits of paper or he would cite them for littering. Both of the cops at this point had the looks on their faces that basically screamed that they seriously don't get paid enough for this. Dan had to start telling his kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, and the eldest was sobbing that he won't get his own room now. My sister-in-law and Dan gathered their kids up to try and make one last pathetic attempt just to guilt trip me with the sad family routine. You know, where they all gather together in a sort of group hug while facing one direction. And I swear to you, I'm pretty sure they practiced this ahead of time. All of the kids had the same pleading look with their quivering mouths. My sister-in-law kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look like a sad puppy. And my brother just made the saddest face he possibly possibly could. He then said to me, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't falter, and I told them to keep packing. All the kids and sister-in-law turned the crying up to 11, and Dan yelled at me saying, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help out family." I ended up laughing like a maniac and retorting that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing, and no amount of crying will make me let his family move in, because he's no brother of mine anymore. He is just an entitled jerk who thinks he can take whatever he wants from me, just like when we were kids. Dan started cursing at me until the cops told him to cool it, or he would be in cuffs regardless if I wanted to press charges. So he sucked in his lips, looked a mix of afraid and supremely upset. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother, and sister-in-law had all left, and they said they had no intention of going anywhere until this has been resolved. In fact, in the next few minutes, 2 cops became 4 as more drove in for whatever reason. That gave my parents some extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock that he'd put on my front door, though I got another lock the next day anyways, because I didn't know if he had copies of the keys or not. He was really reluctant to hand them over. Then, instead of handing them to me, he actually threw them down the street and into a storm drain while saying to go get them myself. But one of the cops scolded him for that and made him go get them. He had to pull the grate off just to go in and get the keys, and he got pretty dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he just grumbled, then slammed them down into my hand. I told them all to leave and never come back. My brother said I'd be disowned for this, as if that were some kind of threat to me, and I even voiced that to them. Then, in an overly sarcastic voice, I said something along the lines of the following: "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys, where I always get treated like dirt by you all anyways, because Dan has always been your obvious favorite. You treated me all so badly when I was growing up that if Dan ever needs an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So you can do like you always told me to do when I was mistreated by all of you, and you can suck it up." My parents were floored after I said that, and the quartet of cops were looking pretty judgmental at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put nasty parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops, because they'll likely not try anything really stupid then. My mother just started crying and walking away. My father just stood there looking like he wanted to hit me, and Dan just held his kids in defeat. Oh, and the sister-in-law was off having a tantrum in my front lawn. Soon enough, they all formed a line, handing out boxes, and got their stuff out of my house. Nothing had been unpacked yet, so it was all taken out pretty quickly. But while doing it, my mother kept saying it wasn't too late, and I could still do it for Dan several times, each time trying to bargain more and more, just to try and make me change my mind. She said that Dan could pay me rent if I let them stay, and when that didn't work, she said I could move back in with them to let Dan rent my house so I wouldn't have to share the building. I told her to shut up and keep packing boxes, because I don't want Dan or his family around. I don't want his money, and I certainly don't want to live with him or my parents ever again, especially after the way they treated me when I was a kid. Making a deal with my parents would be like making a deal with the devil to me. My sister-in-law ended up having another tantrum after hearing that, and threw a box down, then sat on the ground to have a pity party because she didn't want to go back to sharing a house with my parents. And she just sat there looking angry and sad until everyone else was finished. She didn't even want to get up when it was time to leave. They finally got everything out of the house and put it into the truck. So before they left, I laid into my parents one last time about all the stuff they put me through growing up. And with 4 cops being right there, they couldn't do much other than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on so many things that happened, and even pointed out how they couldn't just do something nice for me, like letting me stay over with my camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Dan and my sister-in-law ridicule me and call me a bum. Well, who's the bum now? They wanted to kick me out of my own house so Dan could stay in it rent-free. Yet when I needed a place to go, they wanted to gouge me for more than I could afford just to park my camper when they knew I was out of the job. There were more extremely judgmental stares from the cops when I said all of that, so I put my parents on the spot one more time and asked them what I ever did other than being born to deserve being treated so badly. Because when I finally have a bit of success in my life, they just want to snatch it away from me and give it to their favorite child, since they'd rather I give everything to Dan and have nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money that I earned. I owed them nothing, and I won't be asking them for anything ever again, because clearly I will never be anything more than a doormat or a cash cow in their eyes. But I got no answers from them. They just stood there, looking like fish out of water, so I continued continued ranting and asked them what in God's name made them think that they were such good parents after all that. My father was beet red, but more embarrassed than angry this time, and my mother was crying that she was a horrible person, and I bluntly agreed by reiterating that yes, she is a horrible person. They all are. They are terrible people and they all knew it. But if I'd called them out on this stuff in private instead of in public, they'd all get mad at me and still act like I'm in the wrong. They would just keep up the denial for so long that it became part of who they were. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket to cry, and my father looked more defeated than I've ever seen him in my life. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished putting everything back in the moving truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen. They all got back in their vehicles, and my sister-in-law just stood staring at me with malice all the way up until my brother finally got her to drive the minivan home. And as soon as they were all gone, I got back online again and spilled the beans about what happened. My parents were too embarrassed to even try and defend themselves, and while the family was somewhat split before this incident, it was now a landslide in my favor. Nearly all of my family was sided with me after this incident, and those who haven't simply aren't siding with anybody. No matter how much my parents tried to previously say that we did it all for Dan, no one listened to them anymore, so any remaining familial support that they had was now officially gone. Many in the family who I expected wouldn't side with me did end up taking my side. That includes the former flying monkeys, so I guess they finally had enough. Around that time, I offered to host half the family at next Christmas Eve in my new house, and as you could probably guess, my parents were not invited. I wasn't blocked on my brother or sister-in-law's profile, surprisingly, and I saw that my sister-in-law had her fourth baby in early November. They are still living with my parents, and I'm pretty sure they knew I was watching, because my sister-in-law kept making passive-aggressive posts every couple of weeks or so about not having enough space while living with my parents, probably to see if she can guilt me in some kind of way. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father up the wall, because they aren't getting any peace and quiet in their old age, with 3 rowdy, obnoxious kids, a mentally unstable sister-in-law, my golden child brother, and a newborn baby in the house all at once. Perhaps they could move into a camper in their own backyard and let Dan take over the house completely. They might just get some peace and quiet then. Yeah, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure they could do that for Dan. This story is absolutely insane. The fact that this guy went through all of this turmoil and all at the expense of his family is absolutely insane. There's no other way of putting it. I mean, these people drilled a hole in his lock and broke into his house, as well as forged documents just to try and ensure that they could move in. That's an entirely new level of criminal activity that I don't think anybody ever would have expected. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled mother makes a scene at the restaurant we're eating at, claiming that the order was done wrong and thus embarrassing me and herself in the process. Here's what happened. So my mom has always been super entitled. The following event happened over 30 years ago, but my mom still scolds me about it from time to time, citing it as both a demonstration of my inability to stick up for myself, as well as a refusal to support her. First off, let me set the stage for some background information. Growing up, I was always small and underweight for a guy. Even fully grown, I'm only 5'5". In high school, I never weighed more than 125 pounds. My mom, on the other hand, has always struggled with her weight since having her first baby. She was 4'8", but she always weighed close to 200 pounds. We went out to eat almost every week, but I was made to order a kids meal for kids 12 and under until I was about 15 years of age or so. And once I got too big to order one of those, I always had to share one of my meals with one of my sisters on the premise that we were smaller than other kids our age, or with my mom, who then claimed that she was exercising portion control as part of her perpetual weight loss regimen. When I turned 19, I joined the army. I gained 11 pounds in basic training and gained about 6 more after that, so I got to about 142 pounds before stabilizing my weight. At the time this story takes place, I had just left the army and had spent several years getting used to eating full adult portions of food. I was visiting my parents and they took me out to eat. When we got to the restaurant, my mom asked me if I wanted to share some fajitas. I looked at the menu and saw that they offered a platter of fajitas for 2, so I agreed. Even though my mom was born in the United States, she moved to Mexico at a very young age before returning to the US as an adult, so her English is heavily accented and not always grammatically correct. When the waiter came to take our order, she loudly declared, "We will have fajitas and we will share," while pointing to me. The waiter nodded his understanding and moved on. The food came out and it was great. Throughout the meal, my mother commented on how delicious it was. I was still maintaining much of my military regimen at the time, time, so I was knocking out push-ups and sit-ups every morning, in addition to walking or running several miles a day, and I was able to easily put away lots of food. We made short work of those fajitas, and I even ate all the grilled onions and vegetables off the platter. By the time we were done devouring our meal, there wasn't a scrap of food left. Everything was fine until the waiter dropped off the bill, and my mom noticed that we had been billed for the fajitas for two platter. Suddenly, the whining commenced. She'd been tricked into overeating. She wasn't feeling well. Why couldn't the waiter just get the order right? Was I feeling okay after eating all that? I'd spent the entirety of my childhood dealing with the constant outrage and nonstop complaining, so I just took it in stride. I told her that I was fine, that I enjoyed my meal, and that I was glad that we got the order for two, because the order for one wouldn't have been enough. Well, that was beside the point. We were being overcharged, and she was going to make it right. That's when the waiter came by and asked if everything was all right. She responded by launching into the same tirade that I had been enduring for the past few minutes. I wanted to sink into my chair. I mostly kept my head down, unable to look the waiter in the eye, but the few side glances that I snuck his way indicated that he was at a loss. He alternated between enduring her rant and incredulously eyeing our clean plate, after calmly explaining to her that he could not compensate us for our order when the platter was completely clean. She then demanded to see a manager. The manager came out and did the same song and dance as the waiter. After several minutes of histrionics and threats, the manager told her that the best he could do was 10% off that dish. By this time, my mom realized that this was as close as she was going to get for a win, so she just went ahead and took it. When the manager left, she was still fuming. She turned to me and said in Spanish, "Can you believe that? Don't you think I was in the right?" I replied honestly. I told her that no, she wasn't in the right, that I had also been under the impression that she was ordering the fajitas for two, and I reiterated that I enjoyed the meal as it was. That then transferred her fury right onto me. I was a pushover. I was unsupportive. I was manipulative. I was being spiteful. For the rest of my visit, I got the silent treatment, which was honestly a blessing in comparison to the alternative. From time to time, when my mom's feeling annoyed with me for one imagined offense or another, she brings up this incident as a reminder of my inadequacy, but it only reminds me of how crazy and entitled she truly is. Yeah, your mom definitely sounds like a piece of work. She very clearly ordered the fajitas for two, and she just wanted to try and get a deal out of it. And people who act like that honestly are just so intolerable to be around. And worst of all, she clearly was underfeeding you as a kid, as well as just trying to get a deal out of every dinner opportunity that she could. I mean, she made you order from the kids menu all the way up until you were 15 years old. I mean, that's just obnoxious in my opinion, but at least you know exactly where you stand with your mother. She is very clearly entitled, and you can know moving forward exactly who you're dealing with. An entitled Karen tries to haggle down a price estimate that we give her from my business, but my manager simply was not having it, as he put her in her place almost instantaneously, refusing to entertain her attempts to try and get a cheaper price. Here's what happened. So for a bit of context, the software development company I intern at uses a special sheet to estimate the cost of building a certain software for a client. The sheet includes employees working on the project, how long they estimate it will take, and pretty much all the logistics associated with it. After an intern goes around the department collecting this info from the various employees, we then calculate the cost and send it to the client to accept or reject. And since our company is so popular in the area that I work at, we have a pretty long wait sometimes. So if you reject the estimate, chances are you might have to wait for a long time all over again just to request a new one. So the day was slow when this happened, and they mostly had me man the phone and go on coffee runs. Typical intern stuff overall. Then a client calls in stating that she wants a specific software for her employees so she can more accurately track their work hours. By this point into my internship, I had done at least 4 or 5 of these sheets at least, and I was taught by my supervisor how to identify which departments would be needed for which projects. So after gathering the details from the client, I hang up and translate the needs for the employees and essentially explain it in programmer jargon. A half an hour later, I'm done with the sheet, and I have checked the calculations 3 times. So I email the client, and I swear not even 2 minutes later, I get an estimate rejected message pop up on the company smartphone that I was given. She added a reply stating, "This estimate is non-compatible with me." So I responded by saying, "We are really sorry to hear that, ma'am. Please enjoy the rest of your day." And then I go about my business. Roughly an hour later, she emails the phone again, asking me if that's all I have to say. By this point, I realize what she was trying to do, and I report to my supervisor that this entitled Karen was trying to haggle the price. My my supervisor calls Karen's phone and asks her if she would like to have the estimate resent to her so she can accept, and the Karen outright tells her she wants a cheaper price, to which my supervisor tells her the price is non-negotiable and she can either take it or leave it. So the entitled Karen uses her signature move, requesting to speak to my manager's manager, but my supervisor literally simply informed her that she'd get the same response and then just hung up on her. This entitled Karen did eventually call back and even had the audacity to show up to the building just to try and renegotiate the price. But fortunately for us, she was shot down every single time, and eventually this entitled Karen gave up. It's always really satisfying to watch when the customers realize that they aren't worth the business they bring when you account for the pain that comes from them. I mean, seriously, the entitled Karen was obviously looking for some kind of argument, and the fact that she thought she was going to try and haggle this down to some ridiculous number just to try and steal a deal from this business is actually incredibly entitled. I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into making this type of software, regardless of what the context is. It's not some easy copy and paste job. Like, there's a lot of coding and there's a lot of things that go into it. So it's really refreshing to see that this business doesn't bow down to these idiots. Because you know what? Sometimes you have managers or supervisors who have absolutely no spine and they bend to whatever the customer has to say, and basically makes any kind of pricing or any kind of policy very flexible and almost non-existent. Like, what's the point of having a price if anybody can call up, have a bad attitude, get offended because they don't like the price, and then haggle it down to something lower? But thankfully, the original poster's manager did not allow that to happen, because this entitled Karen clearly just wanted to get her way, regardless of the time or effort it would take just to fill her request. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled boss expects me to work unpaid overtime, completely ignoring the fact that I'm part-time and that I won't be paid if I work any further. So I get malicious and I choose to walk out when my time's up. And needless to say, my manager was not happy. Here's what happened. So I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got to this position because it was just an easy escape from teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be a principal, which is pretty common where I come from. And she also did this just to flaunt the little authority that she got from it. One issue that I had with her was about punctuality. She was especially hard-nosed about it, which would have been fine if she weren't herself systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to request students to be on time at classes when the principal was half an hour late at a meeting she scheduled herself with their parents. The end of the year comes around, and it's time for the final exams of the high school students. The students start to receive their convocations for the exam week. When we see the convocations, we're already upset because the time is wrong on purpose. It would tell a student that they need to be there at 7:30 for a 4-hour test without even telling them that the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 o'clock and ends at 12 o'clock. A few days later, the teachers receive their own convocations to monitor the test themselves. It's usual to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned on each of our convocations that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 o'clock exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to screw the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and let the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time. But 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most. And as teachers, we are used to being there simply before class starts anyways. Most of us simply ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual. But a dozen of us decided to comply, and we sent her emails tallying up the total number of hours we'd be working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered some BS that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass, we complied, and my colleagues declared their overtime. In the end, that came to about 30 minutes of overtime total for doing absolutely nothing, and we still had to get paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues, and that's because I work part-time, and as such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. The reason for that is because both part-time and overtime are paid more than regular hours, so it has to be either or. Friday comes around, and I've sent a new email reminding her about the upcoming issues, and I still don't get an answer. The last 4-hour test starts at 1 o'clock, and at 2:45, I ask my colleague monitoring the room next door, who is also in on the plan, mind you, to cover me for the next 5 minutes. There's a door between the two exam rooms, and we can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there is a room full of students with 2.5 hours left, and I don't know if she's scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all my hours for this week, and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my teaching exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch. It's 3 seconds until I'm just about having to leave. I look at her face while she gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion to realization, all the way up to anger. And just as she's about to answer, it's time. So I turn around and I walk away. She looks at me and says, "What are you doing? Stay here, we're not finished." But I answer without looking by saying, "Sorry, my time's up. My work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you." And I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public, in full view and hearing of students, would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd be getting in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring in earlier. I thank my colleague, and I point at the professor who's just catching up. She is red as a beet, and I tell him, "I brought you the principal." I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her for me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which really must have set her off because she leaves early on Fridays, and she did not want to be there. Next week, obviously, she requested that we had a talk in her office, and when I did that, I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong, and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike, that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and the teaching staff. Needless to say, she was definitely in the wrong, because this principal simply knew that she would lose. That is a really cool story, and I wish where I live teachers had this kind of flexibility, as well as this ability to flex their rights. For context, the original poster is from overseas. I'm not entirely sure what country they're from, but based on the fact that they have a union and they were able to cut out of there without some kind of negative repercussion, kind of gave it away in my opinion. But it really would be nice if we had something like that in the States. And maybe there are teacher unions that can step in and help defend you when you're under some kind of scrutiny for leaving when your time's up. If there is, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. But it is always absolutely satisfying to see some kind of upper manager or a principal in this matter get put in their place by their own ignorance. And if she simply read her emails and reviewed who was watching what when it came to monitoring for this exam, she probably could have avoided so much trouble with this, as well as avoided any type of future strike from this union. My girlfriend freaks out and starts sobbing anytime she makes me uncomfortable or sad, and it's gotten to the point where I honestly don't know what to do. So my girlfriend and I have been dating for a few years, and this was honestly always kind of been a problem. It used to be worse and happen more frequently, but it always leaves me shaken. It just happened again, and I feel like I really need advice because I don't understand what is going on. Basically, almost any time she does anything to make me sad or hurt my feelings, she has a complete meltdown, and it turns into me comforting her instead. I genuinely do believe that she's really feeling the emotions that she's expressing and not manipulating me. However, I always come away from it feeling like I just diffused something tragic and didn't get to work through why I was feeling hurt in the first place. I've talked to her about this after the fact, and she agrees that she needs to work on it, yet it still happens sometimes and I really hate it. Tonight, I had gotten home from work and was really looking forward to spending time together. We were sitting cuddled on the couch discussing what to do for the evening. She's gonna make dinner while I do laundry, and then we're gonna run errands together. Then she gets a call from a coworker and a friend that her and a bunch of other coworkers are going to a bar and could pick her up as soon as possible. She immediately accepts this and hangs up, and then asks if I want to go too. I'm pretty stunned that she would just throw everything we had planned out the window. But anyways, I'm tired from work and I'm worried about the chores that need to get done, so I just decline. She notices that I'm feeling down and quiet, and I just say I'm sad that she's going to be leaving, which is true, but I tell her to enjoy and just to have fun. But she will not let it go. She keeps saying, "If you don't want me to go, then I just won't." And I say, "I'm not going to make that decision for you, but you seem like you really want to go." But even when I say that, she still won't drop it. I keep telling her it's her decision, and I don't really get why she keeps asking me. She then starts crying. I ask what's going on, and she snaps at me. She says, "I'm only ever here at work, and when I want to go out, you just get sad," which I don't even know how to respond to that because I didn't expect it. So I try to carefully say, "Yeah, I'm sad, but it's not that big of a deal, and I don't think it warrants you starting crying." but that ended up being the wrong thing to say. She starts full on sobbing and says I always invalidate her feelings, which really hurts to hear. I'm completely stunned while also being numb at this point, so I just go to the bedroom and lay down, and later she comes in to get dressed to leave. I ask her to sit down for a moment and I try to explain what we've discussed before, which is that it really hurts that she starts spiraling over me being sad, because then I have to push my feelings aside just to comfort her. But after I said that, she basically said that she thinks it's hypocritical for me to say that because it's like I'm telling her she's overreacting. Then she starts saying that she's terrible, which is a common trend during these spirals, and saying other hateful things towards herself. She's wailing and her coworkers are literally at the door, so I do what I always do and I stamp my feelings out just to comfort her. She left a bit ago and I'm just sitting here feeling like there's a hole in my chest. Like I actually cannot comprehend how it got to this point. Honestly, I feel like tonight's thing is not really a great example either, because it definitely didn't start out being anyone's fault, I think. However, there have been times in the past where she really did say or do something to hurt me, even if it's unintentional, and then it led down the same path. Can I please get some insight into this? Has anyone else ever dealt with something like this in their life? I can't wrap my head around this because, again, I genuinely feel like she is not being intentionally manipulative. However, the end result is that I hate expressing negative feelings around her, and I swallow down everything I have to say as best I can. What should I do? This really sounds like a sketchy situation, and it sounds like your significant other definitely needs therapy. It is not normal to start crying and freaking out over such small things. So that behavior is super inappropriate, even if it's not intentional and you do believe her. It also sounds like she clearly struggles with tolerating how hurting or disappointing someone else will make her feel. Like it literally goes from 0 to 100 pretty quickly if you're dissatisfied or disinterested in whatever she's doing. Like she always has to have some kind of validation from you, so I can completely understand how toxic this would become. But it also seems like you need to break the cycle. Like maybe when she starts freaking out over small things like this, maybe it's time to take a step back and not immediately give her comfort and stomp out your feelings. Like there's nothing wrong with the way you feel. That's not wrong in my opinion. And objectively speaking, it would be near impossible to have a sustainable relationship if your needs are never going to be met simply because your girlfriend freaks out and starts sobbing simply because she thinks that you're upset with her. Like that's not a rational thing for people who are nearly 30 years old to be acting like. But I think at the end of the day, you can't control how she behaves. You can only change what you do. So hopefully you can find some kind of solution to this, because the way she's acting is absolutely obnoxious, whether it's genuine or not. And in my opinion, if I was in your shoes, I would want to try and get this sorted out, because I cannot see this relationship sustaining with this kind of environment. I didn't respect my partner's wishes or boundaries when he needed time to think about our relationship, and as a result, I'm not sure if we're still going to be together, and I honestly don't know what to do. So we've been dating for over 2 months, and the relationship progressed quite quickly, in that if the circumstances had allowed it, we would probably be living together by now. He was fine with me sleeping over his house as often as I wanted to, as long as there were times when we each had our own thing to do, whether it was work, hobbies, a social life, stuff like that. It still wasn't an ideal situation, as he lived with his brother, and I did want a little more privacy and space for myself, but whatever. I never felt entirely comfortable there doing whatever I wanted, and of course, over time, the aim was to see whether we could find a way to live together. The answer was yes at the time, but only when it became possible. So we were eager to see each other all the time in the interim, and I suppose that turned into a form of burnout for the both of us. He has ADHD and approaches problems in a very rational way, which he expects from almost everyone. Unfortunately, my emotional side often dominates, and most of what I say is deemed as an excuse or justification for my behavior. My behavior that evening was certainly unacceptable in hindsight. Otherwise, I wouldn't have behaved the way I did in the first place, and I do acknowledge that what I did was wrong. I suffer from anxiety, OCD, and recovering ED and PTSD, so I expected him to be there for me, as he always has been, and when he wasn't, I panicked and decided to go over thinking that he'd be okay with it, not realizing at the time that the way I feel shouldn't always fall on anyone but myself to fix or deal with. I had just put an overwhelmingly amount of pressure on him to fix all of my problems. He had repeatedly told me not to go over and that we'd talk the next day, but I didn't listen. So when I arrived, he told me to go home and he didn't let me in. I thought the relationship had essentially ended at that point, knowing he probably could never see me as normal ever again, or as a rational person that he would be able to get through through to. I apologized the next day, and he asked me to give him a few days to think about what he should do. Of course, my anxiety and self-destructive nature kicked in, thinking that it was over and that there was no point. So I messaged him every day, asking to meet up so that I could apologize properly. I wanted to tell him that I care about him, I love him, and I miss him. He finally agreed to see me briefly today, and he basically said that he doesn't know if he can feel the same way that he used to about me, that it's as though I'm a different person, and that all of his friends are saying my behavior is definitely a red flag, and that it'll only get worse over time. I was a complete mess the entire time, and could only really listen. Everything I said did sound like an excuse, though I did say that I felt awful for potentially ruining a relationship that was going well, and that I only needed a few modifications here and there. I suggested we give each other space, such as only meeting in public, and the conversation ended with him saying that when and if he chooses to contact me in a few days, or even in a week, then we would see each other. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed for how I acted, and how little I was able to communicate to him. And also, I'm quite afraid of seeing his friends again, simply because of how they will view me. I don't have much interest in going over to his house anymore, as being turned away, and rightfully so, was traumatic in and of itself. I suppose it's just something I'll have to face for the sake of the relationship if he contacts me again. I intend to keep myself busy and not ruminate over the facts, but also try to explain how not listening was a violation of his trust, as well as his boundaries and rights as an individual. What should I do? In my opinion, it seems like the original poster really needs to pump the brakes. You have been with this guy for 2 months, not to mention the fact that you clearly have some anxiety issues that you very clearly need to get under wraps. Like, you're obviously triggered in a lot of ways, and you completely ignored his boundaries just to try and validate your own weird sense of entitlement. And honestly, in my opinion, that's exactly what it is. Because here's the thing, your triggers are your responsibility. You need to manage them yourself, and in my opinion, it is not his responsibility to manage that for you. So when he says, hey, I need some time, you really should have respected that. But I also think he's probably cluing in and trying to give you the soft approach that he's basically breaking up with you. He said that, hey, if I contact you in a week, or if I even contact you at all, then we can try and talk to each other. But in my opinion, that's code talk for him saying, yeah, I don't want to be with you. I mean, you're also thinking that, yeah, you would have been living together if the circumstances were different. And I seriously think that's way too early to be thinking about this early in a relationship. So hopefully, if this relationship doesn't work out, you can be better in the next one, because your behavior truly was not okay in this situation, and hopefully you do better in the future. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, make sure to subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.